I'd like to call to order the Reidsville City Council meeting for Tuesday, October 14th, 2025. First thing on the agenda will be invocation by Reverend Ray Stokes, co-founder with his wife, Sandee Stokes, of Up With Christ and Down With Crime. And Reverend Stokes, would you please also send up a prayer for Councilwoman Teresa Scoble? She's a little under the weather.
Sir, that was my intent.
Okay, thank you, sir.
First of all, let me give thanks for the honor of standing here to give prayer tonight. Honor to our mayor and to the city council. Honor to our city manager. Honor to Council Member Teresa Stubble in her absence. Let us pray. Always, God, our Father, we come in the mighty name of Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. We come, Father, asking you for forgiveness of any sin that we have committed this day. Father, we pray that you would remove it from us as far as the east is from the west. Father, we come this evening with a most grateful and thankful heart to be a part of this city council meeting. Father, we pray your blessings would be upon our mayor. Father, and your blessings would be upon each one of our council members. Father God, we pray that your blessing would be upon each presenter. We pray, Father, that you would be with us in the motions and the minutes and discussion, the adoptions that will take place this evening. Father, we pray for your wisdom, your grace, but most of all, Father, for your mercy. Father, thank you for your faithfulness toward us. We pray now that you would bless each one in attendance this evening within this room. You know what we need better than we know what to ask for. But Father, we want to thank you that since we're here for another council meeting, that you would bless the city of Reidsville. Dear Lord, that you would bless our mayor and each one of our council members. Bless our city manager, Father God, and bless our chief of police and our fire chief, dear Lord. Father, and I would be remiss if I failed to ask you, dear Lord, that you would bless the incumbent at-large members for this upcoming election. Father, we pray that you would bless not only them for re-election, but bless the new announced candidates for first-time election. Dear Lord, we pray in Jesus' name that you would be with us in the proceedings this evening, that we might be able to give you honor, praise, glory, and honor for all that you continually do for us. It's in the mighty and precious, magnificent, and sovereign name of our Lord and Savior, Jesus the Christ. Amen.
Amen. Amen. We all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Council, you've had an opportunity to take a look at the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda? You have a motion?
Yes.
We have a second.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, raise your right hand. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is a number of proclamations and recognitions. We'll be doing recognition of Fire Prevention Week, October 5 through 11, 2025. Recognition of October as Community Planning Month. Recognition of Lieutenant John Pulliam, who retired from the Reidsville Police Department with 30 years of service to the city of Reidsville. And recognition of Sergeant James Michael Austin, who retired from the city of Reidsville Police Department with 30 years of service. We'll start with the Fire Prevention Week. Whereas the Reidsville Fire Department is dedicated to the safety of its citizens, especially protecting life and property from the devastating effects of fire. And whereas the members of the fire service are joined by other concerned residents of this city, as well as businesses, schools, service clubs, and organizations in their safety efforts. And whereas while this special week has been set aside to remind everyone of the importance of fire education, we should remember to practice fire safety throughout the year. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Donald L. Gorham, mayor of the city of Reidsville, do hereby proclaim the week of October 5th through October 11th as Fire Prevention Week. In home, work, and school. In homes, work, and school, and to heed the message of the 2025 Fire Prevention theme. Charge in fire safety, lithium-ion batteries in your home. This is the 14th day of October 2025. I realize this is the 14th day. We said fire safety was fine. But it's better late than never. And we did not have council meeting that particular week, so we have it.
Sure, I'll be brief. Mayor and all members of council, thank you all for officially recognizing Fire Prevention Week here inside the city of Reidsville. Certainly, I would be remiss to stand here and accept this proclamation alone. We have some true dedicated professionals who spend a lot of time in local schools, private schools, industrial facilities, institutional facilities, teaching our public fire education program. So these are the men and women who really get the job done and make our public fire education program a success. If anyone is interested in this service, please don't hesitate. Reach out to us at Fire Station 1. Or even if you have any questions, we'll be happy to help you any way that we can. Thank you.
Next, a proclamation for Community Planning Month. Mr. Drew Bigelow, would you bring your whole crew up? Green Bay Packers. Whereas change is constant and affects so many places, including the city of Reidsville. Whereas community planning and plans can help manage this change in a way that provides better choices for how people work and live, and provides an opportunity for all residents to be involved in making choices that determine the future of their community. And whereas the full benefits of planning require public officials and citizens who understand support, and demand excellence in planning and plan implementation. And whereas the month of October is designated as National Community Planning Month throughout the United States to recognize the contributions of professional planners like those in the city who are committed to public service. And whereas the American Planning Association and its professional institute, the American Institute of Certified Planners, endorsed this month to showcase the contribution sound community planning makes to the quality of the environment and publicly recognizes dedicated members of planning commissions and other citizen planners who contribute their time and expertise to the improvement of the city of Reidsville. Now, therefore, I, Donald L. Gorham, on behalf of the Reidsville City Council, hereby designate October 2025 as Community Planning Month in the city of Reidsville in conjunction with the national celebration. This is the 14th day of October, 2025.
Yes, so many of you may not know, I got my first start in local government as a planner 20 plus years. So I recognize, as many of you probably do, how important planning is for future growth in the city. We are delighted to have a great planning staff, great administration, and a great city council to help make the city grow. So with that, I'll turn it over to our planning director, Ms. Bigelow.
So I'd just like to thank the city of Reidsville for the opportunity to serve as planning director. I'm new in this role, but I've taken it in stride. I really appreciate the support that I've gotten. And I want to recognize Claudia Moore. She was an internal promotion to planner. Without her, I wouldn't have been successful in this role thus far. And we're really looking forward to what the next few months and years bring for her as she takes on the role of city planner.
Thank you for
All right, thank you.
Lieutenant Pulliam, will you come on up?
While Lieutenant Pulliam is coming up, I got a story. He's a straight-laced cop. By the book. One night I was coming home from church, traveling up Warhead Street. And for some reason, I didn't get the information in the mailbox about my tag. And I stopped at the road check. And I looked through my window and said, "Councilman, tag, run out." I would advise that you go straight home and get it taken care of at your earliest convenience. So I appreciated him using discretion.
Larry, I just want to say I appreciate you allowing me to recognize Lieutenant Pulliam as we go way back. I retired myself and worked alongside with him. So let me go ahead and present Lieutenant Pulliam with a certificate of appreciation. So whereas Lieutenant John Pulliam began his career in law enforcement with the Reidsville Police Department as a patrol officer on December 30th, 1996, officially retiring from the department on June 1st, 2025, with 30 years in the state retirement system. And whereas Lieutenant Pulliam rose in the ranks of RPD, first promoted to sergeant in October 2004, before becoming a lieutenant in February of 2012. Whereas during his years on the police force, he showed himself to be an outstanding law enforcement officer in all facets of the job, demonstrating daily the 5 core values of the Reidsville Police Department: integrity, professionalism, respect, teamwork, and courage in everything he did. Whereas Lieutenant Pulliam worked diligently to seek resolutions to any issues that arose and was able to use his considerable communication skills to speak with employees and the public. And whereas Lieutenant Pulliam's exemplary attitude, work ethic, and proven leadership skills not only made him an excellent officer and lieutenant of the patrol division, but also inspired and motivated others within the department to succeed and excel. Now, therefore, words of the mayor, I, Donald Gorham, on behalf of the Reidsville City Council, take great pleasure in recognizing and honoring Lieutenant John Pulliam on the occasion of his retirement from the Reidsville Police Department, and thank him for his dedication and devotion to the city of Reidsville and its citizens, all of whom benefited because he worked tirelessly on the job to keep them all safe. This the 14th day of October 2025, and it's signed by Donald L. Gorham, Mayor. Don, congratulations. And the second thing is, so we're presenting you with the famous gold watch. This is a new edition gold Rolex purchased by the mayor. So, again, just a joke thing. But presenting this to you, and congratulations again on your 30 years. Anything you want to say?
Not much. I just feel lucky to have been here 30 years, worked with a lot of great people. A lot of them are here tonight. Went by a lot faster than I thought.
And he's also continuing to work with the police department as part-time, helping out in the evidence room with evidence custodian. He's asking for some more stress for the evidence. Congratulations.
Time, I'm going to ask Sergeant Mike if you can come forth, Mike Alston. Yes. You know, the thing I want to say to you is well done. Thank you, sir. This dedication to this thing has really paid off. I've always known you to be fair, firm, consistent. I'm so proud of you. Appreciate the years that we worked together on the team and got things done. What a privilege it is for me to read this. Mayor, did you want to say anything before I say this?
Well, got a story about Mike, too.
I had someone
Call me and complain about Mike. I didn't see what they said about Mike. So I had an opportunity to see the actual stuff. I stopped by Mike's office afterwards. Mike, I don't know if I would use my glove or stuff or something, because the guy was just over me. Mike stood there just like he was watching a cowboy.
if you know me, you know that I don't like it. So,
Mike, he's a man of integrity. Really is.
it's a tough guy.
I appreciate it, Mike. Good to see you.
Yeah. Well, what an honor for me to read this certificate of appreciation. Whereas Sergeant James Michael Alston began his career in law enforcement with the Reidsville Police Department as a police officer on April 7, 1997, and officially retired from the department on August 1st, 2025, with 30 years in the state retirement system. And whereas after being hired as a police officer, he was promoted to police officer 3 in September of 2007, and a police sergeant over the patrol division in March of 2015. And whereas Sergeant Alston was extremely knowledgeable in the area of public safety and was able to use that knowledge and his ability to work well with the members of the RPD and other law enforcement agencies to effectively supervise his patrol team. And whereas Sergeant Alston mounted the core values of the department, exhibiting teamwork, leadership that resulted in him truly making a difference, not only among his fellow employees, but also among the citizens trusted to his care. And whereas those traits combined with his ability to make sound, logical decisions reflected Sergeant Austin's devotion and dedication and his professionalism and his service to the local community. Now, where therefore I, Donald L. Gorham, on behalf of the City Council, take great pleasure in recognizing and honoring Sergeant Mike Austin on the occasion of his retirement from the Reidsville Police Department. Thank him for his many years of service to the city of Reidsville and the citizens, and he strive to make the community safe for all. And this, the 14th day of October, 2025, is signed by our most honorable mayor, Donald Gorham. Congratulations, Mike. Well done. Well done.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you. Appreciate you.
Oh, and before you have words more to say, it's now, Lieutenant Pulliam, it's a role that you do too, right?
Cheaper version. Actually, my first night as a sergeant on patrol, being in charge that night for the first time, we had two officers involved in different wrecks, and one other officer involved in a car chase that ended in a fire on 14th. Everybody was fine to be dead, but it was also my birthday that night. It was a nice indoctrination to the role of supervisor. And honestly, that night I kept thinking about my first lieutenant, Willie Harris.
Right.
How he would have handled it, and that's what pretty much got me through that night.
Well, thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Man, I'm so honored to hear you say that. Thank you. Thank you. Good job. Good job.
How in the world do we follow that? Next item on the agenda is the approval of the consent agenda. There are 4 items. Does anyone want to have one pulled? If not, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? To approve.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, raise your right hand. Next, we have public hearings. The first one, consideration of request by the North Carolina Wildlife Habitat Foundation, NCWHF, to build the Pat Foy Brady Memorial Youth Sportsman Pavilion at Lake Reidsville, including the naming of the facility and entering into a memorandum of understanding with the city of Reidsville. Enclosure 1, our city manager, Summer Moore.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So I want to read before you, we received a proposal for the Pat Foy Brady Shelter at Lake Reidsville. The North Carolina Wildlife Habitat Foundation would like to partner with the city of Reidsville to build the Pat Foy Brady Memorial Youth Sports Pavilion at Lake Reidsville. The outdoor pavilion will be approximately 40 feet by 60 feet, and the estimated cost to construct and build this pavilion is between $160,000 to $200,000. This project will be 100% paid for by the North Carolina Wildlife Habitat Foundation. And attached in your agenda package, you'll see the MOU between the City of Reidsville and the naming policy with accompanying documents. An outline of what's being asked tonight. The North Carolina Wildlife Habitat Foundation will be responsible for the following items, including fully funding this project. They'll provide a professional blueprint for the pavilion, provide all financial support for the construction of the pavilion, including tables, chairs, and a hardscape with a fire pit, provide the name of the pavilion, which would be the Pat Foy Brady Memorial Youth Sportsman Pavilion, and the NCWHF. The NCWHF will provide oversight of the construction process. The ask of the City of Reidsville. The North Carolina Wildlife Habitat Foundation is requesting the following items listed below from the City of Reidsville. Assistance with permitting and reviews by the municipality. Provide demolition of the existing structure, which is Shelter 4. The slab, designated trees and vegetation, provide grading of the site, mark setback from the lake, mark, provide, and install erosion control measures, provide power and water within 5 feet of the site, remove obstructive vegetation to improve the viewscape of the lake, and provide perpetual maintenance of the site. Also to provide the NCWHF access to the site upon request for conservation education related events and wildlife habitat conservation related events. So that's the overview of what's been asked for tonight. On the city's behalf, all that's being requested could be done in-house with our existing team members. So with that, I believe that opens us up to the public hearing, Mayor. So that's the overview that I have to provide you.
Okay, the public hearing then will open at 6:26. Do we have anyone here who'd like to speak for?
Good evening. My name is Greg Irwin. I'm the chairman of the North Carolina Wildlife Habitat Foundation. We're a volunteer group, 501c3, and I have Sandee Brady here, Alan Sharp, and Tim Cox. Tim Cox has been taking lead on this project. We've had a lot of communications. I appreciate you guys' dialogue back and forth. It's certainly a pleasure to be here and meet everybody in person, and pretty impressed with the professionalism that you guys run in this town and seeing the people in. So excited to be a part of it and for the foundation to be able to build this and serve the community there at the lake. And if there's any questions about it, I think the memorandum we vetted through, but we're certainly here to answer any questions or provide any specifics.
Does anyone have any questions?
Guys, have you got anything? All right.
I would like to say one thing, is just thank you so much for the contribution. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak for? Is there anyone who'd like to speak against? We'll close the public hearing at 6:28. What is the council's favor?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the MOU between the North Carolina Wildlife Habitat Foundation and the City of Reidsville for the construction and naming request for the Pat Foy Brady Memorial Youth Sportsman Pavilion at Lake Reidsville.
You have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, raise your right hand. Thank you.
Thank y'all. Thank y'all.
Next public hearing, consideration of an ordinance to extend the corporate limits of the city of Reidsville to include approximately 31 acres off of Vance Street Extension, A2 2025-04, enclosure 2, Drew Bigelow, Planning and Community Director. Drew, you up here before I got finished.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, and Madam Manager. So attached in your packet is a fully executed request by the property owner, Patriot Property Group, to voluntarily annex approximately 31 acres located on Van Street Extension, Rockingham County, long parcel identification number 799-406-276549. This property was recently recombined, so there is not a new PIN number for the property yet. This is a continuous annexation as the city limit line already runs through the southernmost portion of the property. Due to the non-controversial nature of the request, the city clerk has reviewed the sufficiency of the petition, and the first two steps of the annexation have been combined. Staff finds the petition to be valid and recommend approval of the ordinance to extend the corporate limit after the required public hearing. And you will hear the rezoning for this next month. So it is not back-to-back this time. Are there any questions?
Any questions of Drew? Okay. Public hearing will open at 6:31. Is there anyone who'd like to speak for?
Good evening. I'm Clint Walker. I'm one of the founders of Freedom Academy. We are the owners of Patriot Property Group. The 31 acres that is located here on Vance Street Extension will be the site of our future campus home. We have experienced an enormous amount of growth in our school family over the last 4 years and have outgrown the church facility that we are currently occupying at Growing Oaks on 158. Through a lot of prayerful consideration, we purchased this 31 acres of property several months ago, and as Drew mentioned, there's a portion of it that already belongs to the city jurisdiction, but the majority of it belongs to the county. Through our prayers and consideration, we just feel that the safety of our students from fire and police presence is paramount, and so that is the reason we are wanting to voluntarily annex this property into the city. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak for? Is there anyone who'd like to speak against? Public hearing closes at 6:32. What's the pleasure of council?
Mayor and council, I'd like to make a motion that the proposed volunteer annexation request be approved.
We have a motion, and we have a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, raise your right hand. By the big smile, I see that you approve. Okay. Next item on the agenda, consideration of program accomplishments and performance for closeout of the city's FY19 Community Development Block Grant, CDBG-1, Grant 19-1-3112, Enclosure 3, Amanda Whitaker. Withers Ravenel.
Good evening. In April of 2020, the city was awarded a U.S. Department of Housing and Urban CDBG funds from North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality Division of Water Infrastructure. And this project was put into place from a competitive grant application that you guys sent in to the state. So HUD funds come directly from the federal government to the state, and you guys put in that competitive application in 2019, and it was awarded in 2020. This project originally was put into place for the rehab and replacement of deteriorated and aged sewer outfall lines. The project was to make improvements to a low and moderate income community, and that was the way it was approved for the CDBG project. So CDBG requires that you work in low to moderate income communities. And that's why we chose this community, and that's the purpose of the project, is to benefit those communities. The funds were originally approved for the scope of a 7,800 linear foot line that was deteriorated, aged. It was an outfall line in the areas of Hart Street, Washington Avenue, Circle Drive, Terry, and Ray Streets. The final constructed project scope was rehabilitated on those streets. Those streets were included, and the amount of linear feet was 6,937 linear feet of sanitary sewer main, which was over 40 years old, 799 linear feet of sanitary sewer laterals, and 181 vertical feet of manhole rehabilitation. The project activities were primarily in low to moderate income communities. These were residential areas that were provided in the application. We are required to do a certain percentage, which is at least 51%. It was actually above that. So we originally put in the application, I believe it was 86.84%. That was done through surveying that we looked at for area-wide. When we did this, it was during COVID, so we have to look at area-wide benefits. And in this area, the surveys that came back from the 2011 and 2015 data were 86.84%.
What was 86.4%?
86.84% was the low to moderate income benefit of the neighborhood.
Our neighborhood, 86.
And so when we say the neighborhood, that is the project area. So when you look at the boundaries on that map. And that included about 91 people. And the breakdown of that is 14 elderly, 17 disabled, 21 female head of households, 28 white, 62 black African American, and 1 multiracial. So I'm going to go into the project details a little bit. The grant requires us to go into the finances as well. So I'm going to break that down. Originally, when we applied for $1.99298 million. What was expended to date was $1.206910.04 for the sewer improvements line item, which is the construction line item. The expenditure, and we're looking at total on your total line item, $1,039,538.32. Out of the administration is $100,067,371.72. We're going to go over the CDBGI only. The total requested, so that was what was proposed in the grant application, $1,800,334. Administration, $198,964. For a total of $199,298. The total CDBGI expended, $1,039,538.32. Total administration, $139,492.05. For a total CDBGI, $1,179,30.37. All of the program's compliance and performance reports have been submitted. The program is in compliance. To date, there haven't been any citizen complaints that we've been made aware of. That has all been reported to the state. The final report has been submitted to the state. So the purpose of this public hearing is really to let the public know of the accomplishments, let them know what you applied for, let them know what you completed to date, let them know about the finances, to hold the public hearing for the closeout of the project. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Anyone have any questions?
I'm just curious,
seek these grants out yourself and then find the communities that need them? Does our community reach out directly to you, requesting you to do that? How does that work?
Typically, our communities reach out to us, yes.
Don't have a question, but I have just a comment or two. I personally work with this particular grant. I went from door to door, knocking on doors to speak to the residents in the communities, and they had to fill out just a brief application, basically a yes-no situation. And took me about 3-4 weekends to do it. It was a very pleasant experience, and it was something that I wouldn't mind doing again. And the people understood in these neighborhoods that they had sewer lines that needed to be replaced. And everybody was happy to be a part of it. And we certainly do appreciate that grant. Okay. Anyone else have questions or comments? Okay, thank you. Anyone else who'd like to speak about the closeout? I don't think there's any negative about it, but I'll ask if there's anyone who'd like to come and speak. Bill, is it necessary that we vote here on the closeout? Okay. What's the pleasure of council on the closeout?
I would make a motion, Mayor, to accept this as proposed and close this out. I'd also like to thank your company for thinking of us and helping our community that is in need, especially the low to moderate community that we have here. Thank you very much.
Okay, we have a motion. We have a second. Angela, we closed out at 6:41. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Thank you. All right. Consideration of a program accomplishment and performance for closeout of the city's FY18 Community Development Block Grant, CDBG-NR Grant, 18-C-3080, Enclosure 4, and Ms. Amanda's back with us.
All right, very similar process here. Same federal bucket of money from HUD, but it's coming through a different state agency. So you'll hear some of the same information, but it's coming through the North Carolina Department of Commerce. So this program came right around the same time. So the hearing is for a 2018 grant, but you guys received the funds right around 2020. So this is 18-3080. Usually the Department of Commerce, when you apply, they are about 1 year behind when they give you their funding. So that's why you're looking at an 18 grant versus like a 20 or a 19. So this is the Neighborhood Revitalization Program coming out of the Department of Commerce. It is a HUD program, so their funds come directly from HUD. And the purpose is the same. So this public hearing is to discuss the program performance and to allow the citizens to make any comments about the program or about the expenditures. So originally, the city applied for $750,000. It was a highly competitive program, so you guys received $692,828 through this program, through the North Carolina Department of Commerce. The proposed activities at the time were to repair 11 homes, and that was based off of roughly a $45,000 rehab. So that was the thought process at the time, was that we would roughly look at a $45,000 rehab or a little bit less. Ultimately, the city was able to assist 4 households with this program. All of the funds here benefited low to moderate income households. The same requirement for this program to benefit low to moderate income households applies. The one thing here is typically you're going to benefit 100% low to moderate income because you're working on homes and they're required to provide income documentation when you work on those homes. So each participant was required to provide that. So the program activities are complete at this time. The grant funds have been expended that we're talking about. Approximately 88% of these were expended. So at this point, we are at $548,517.80 of the funds were spent towards rehabilitation of homes, $58,939.42 towards administration fees. The final requisition for these funds was submitted August 14th, 2025. Because of the expenditure deadline, we're closing out and having this public hearing tonight so that we can get all of the paperwork to Commerce and they can come back and do their final monitoring visit because they have not completed their monitoring on this project, so that we can get this successfully completed by that 2025 deadline. Ultimately, there were some increase, which is why you're seeing less homes in the cost to rehab these projects, and mainly because we had projects that were in historical neighborhoods. So that's going to require us to meet historical standards when we're going in and rehabbing these homes, which increased our cost dramatically. So that was one reason for us having less homes than originally anticipated, from 11 to 4. And the timeline of the grant is why we closed out without spending all of the dollars, is trying to get it closed out by the timeline and not being able to add in that additional house at the end because of the timeline required in order to bid it out and get it under contract. And I'll also be happy to answer any questions there as well.
Any questions?
How do you locate these neighborhoods? Come up with these percentages? How do we know how to request these neighborhoods? You understand what I'm saying?
So typically, the communities know where their low to moderate income neighborhoods are. And generally, that's where we start. If they have an area in mind that they've had a lot of requests, or if they have an area that they know that they need some repairs from homeowners. Otherwise, you go off of census data. So you can locate neighborhoods off of census data and you can start from there. But at the end of the day, when you submit these applications, you have to go door to door and you have to do surveys, and they have to come to the door and answer these surveys, and we have to get at least a 51% LMI response. That requires them to respond. So even if you're looking at a low-income neighborhood, a lot of times it's difficult to get people to answer that door. So fortunately, these neighborhoods participated. They came to the door, they answered, and we were able to do that. You guys partnered with PTRC to do that originally, to get those door-to-door surveys for this program, and they were the ones that also were the partner in this to do the rehab specialist work. So they were the rehab specialist, and they went in to the homes to do all of the initial first looks. They did the work write-ups and worked with our contractors on this project.
I just got one more question. So you were given these percentages of the neighborhoods in the community, like the 86.4%.
Correct.
Looking at this other one, what is that? Are those percentages factored in strictly for that community area? Does it take into accountability the city as a whole? How are those things factored?
So census can be dialed into census tracts. There's census blocks, census tracts, and then you have citywide. So you can look at all of those data points. The requirement for what we looked at for the CDBG-I project had to be for that specific area. And so when we looked at that area, we likely looked at a tract to make sure that we were in line before we did surveying. For the CDBG-NR, that's probably what we started out with, but that also dials into surveys. So those paper surveys that we go door to door and get, that's how you end up with your final low to moderate income. So that's why when you have these programs, if you want to change, for example, if you have a boundary and this is your neighborhood, if you want to change that at all, you have to go back and make sure you're not changing your LMI at all. That's not going to change that makeup. If you go outside of that, you're not going to change that percentage of what you've reported to HUD and to the state. So all of these things are factored in from what you've told them you're going to do in your application to any change that you make. And this is why it's important that we have the public hearing at the end, so that we're telling them that we did exactly what we told them that we were going to do in the application, and that we're meeting all of those LMI percentages.
One last question. How do I find that census data, you know, where it breaks down the city and the different elements of our incomes and what we're rated?
So if you go to the CDBGI website, so if you go to the Division of Water Infrastructure on DEQ's website and go to I need funding, under CDBGI, they have a breakdown. And if you would like me to, I can send Summer a link and she can get that straight to you so you don't have to navigate. But if you go under I need funding, you can navigate to that. But I can send her a direct link to that, and it'll take you
the information of the community as a whole.
Correct. It'll give you a breakdown of Reidsville as a whole. You can also go to HUD's website to get that information as well.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
And again, thank you what you've done for us.
Absolutely.
We'll open the public hearing at 6:52. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak for the closeout? Anyone who'd like to speak against? We'll close the public hearing at 6:52. What's the pleasure of council?
I would like to make a motion to approve the CD closeout as is, and I'd like to thank them for what they did for this community.
Second that motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, raise your right hand. Next item on the agenda is public comment. Purpose of public comment period is each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes and may only speak, I got a glare, may only speak at each meeting. Each speaker shall only make comments while at the podium after clearly stating his or her name and physical address. The topic must be something related to the business of Reidsville or something that the city council can have some influence or control over. Remarks shall be addressed to the city council and not to staff or the audience or media. No remark should be made on any matters pertaining to quasi-judicial hearing conducted by the council. Speakers will not be allowed to campaign for public office, promote private business ventures, or use language of personal nature, which insults or demeans any person, or which, when directed at a public official, is not related to his or her public duties. Actions by the city council on topics raised under the public comment section should not be expected. Written comments may be accepted in lieu of oral statements and may be delivered personally or mailed to the city clerk's office at 230 West Moorhead Street, Reidsville, North Carolina.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor Gorham, council members, city employees. My name is Buddy Latta. I live at 1509 Woodside Drive. And the property that I'm speaking to you about is at 1418 Brookwood Drive. I'd first like to thank city employee Josh and his city crew who come to my rescue on 3 different occasions this spring when I had a water problem. And for Councilman Coates coming out in person to look at my problem. I own the property at 1418 Brookwood Drive, and I have a water problem with the street water. With your permission, I have pictures to demonstrate what I would like to present. In the interest of time, I'll try to move quickly. Picture number 1 is a picture taken from Brookwood Drive looking up Colonial Drive. My house is on the right. The water that you can see is in the street and in my yard. Look at the number 2 picture. That's taken from the yard looking back towards the street. Colonial Drive is on the right. Brookwood is in front. That's the water in the yard coming up to the house. If you look at picture number 3, that's the rear of the house. The water has come all the way up into the backyard of the house on this occasion. If you look at number 4, that is a slight schematic that I've drawn. The problem is you can see there are 2 catch basins in the middle of the street. The one on my property at 1418 Brookwood, and there's a pipe that runs underneath the street to the catch basin on the other side, and that is 1408 Colonial Avenue. The homeowner of Colonial Avenue put a catch basin of their own attached to your catch basin. Their catch basin is stopped up, not yours. Your crew has come out and unstopped it on 3 different occasions. What I'm asking is that you compel the homeowner at 1418 Colonial Drive to do something about the water problem. That's basically all I have. Any questions from anyone of what I presented to you?
You got this sketch.
Pardon me?
You got this sketch and the homeowner's catch basin. So if they put a catch basin here, where does the water go after that? Is there some kind of outfall behind their home?
My understanding is that originally it left your catch basin and went through that yard, and there's a stream behind those properties. Sometime in the past, the homeowner put piping in that ditch and covered it over so that the yard would look nice. That piping has collapsed, and the pipe that leads from their catch basin is stopped up. I've got a picture of it, but it shows that it's completely stopped up. So what happens is the water collects in the city's catch basin, backs up across the street and into the yard. It can't leave because of the homeowner's stoppage.
Or a maintenance plan in place, for these?
I'm sorry?
A potential maintenance plan in place by the city could take care of these issues, because we don't turn the storm water over, but I got you.
Thank you, Mr. Loud.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to come before council?
Ray Davis, 602 Boyd Street in Reidsville. To the mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and the rest of our city council members, I stand before you again as a voice for our beloved camping community in effort to speak and to provoke change within our Lake Reidsville in some of the proposed changes to the submitted policies and procedures and prices that was shared last month. Again, the upgrades to our hidden gem was not only needed, but it was overdue. Myself and others, we are appreciative of that our output was received regarding the campground needs. I always proclaimed that an increase was needed, but it seems like the city took a different route in the approach of an RV resort pricing with no amenities. Now, lower prices are here. We now have to try to heal the wounds that has occurred. This 5-page vehicle and tent camping policy, I suggest there are things in it that need to be eliminated and also are things that can be added for our dear campers. One, it states all campsite visitors must leave at 10 p.m. Why not an hour later, especially on weekends? Some are camping from out of town that has city family members in Reidsville that want to come out and see what the camping experience is all about. So I suggest 11 p.m. Move quiet time to 11 p.m. For safety reasons, relocate some of the fire pits that are right there on the wood line. There's fire hazards because trees are covering over the fire pits. Why allow, as it states in the manual, tent campers to take up a full hookup spot rather than letting them camp out near the lakefront where there's only water and electricity? Speaking of the lakefront, there is nowhere in the USA in the RV camping area that you're going to pay more for water and electricity than you do for full hookups. It is just crazy that we have to pay more because of the view of the lake, which is only during the daytime. That needs to be changed. Refund policy. Same day refund. I made a reservation on September the 30th. Today is October the 15th. I have yet to receive my canceled refund. Something needs to be looked at about that. Check-in. A lot of check-ins, not only local places, but other places, check-in is 2 p.m. instead of 3 p.m. We need to look at that. Sir, you're clear. Okay. I have a few more, please. Website need to be updated. Wi-Fi need to greatly be improved. It has in here, when I register, or anybody register, you will make a copy of the person's license. That's not needed. You have all the information, driver license information that they usually put on a form and things of that nature. Lastly, I think we should do away with the city, non-city residency prices. We are hurting a lot of our Reidsville citizens just because they live outside the city limits and charging them more to camp out. A few of them right there on the entranceway to the lake and others. And lastly, we should consider senior discounts or veteran discounts or retiree discounts, what a lot of other people do. With those things, I think we can greatly continue to improve our camping at Lake Reidsville. I hope that you consider recommendations that make.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Okay.
Keith Duncan, 514 Purrington Circle, Reidsville. Thank you, Mayor, members of council, Summer, for allowing me to say a few words. As I talked about last month on the UDO changes for review, I really want to talk about the curb and gutter section that I think is on the agenda. Maybe, I forget which number. I'm a little bit unsure. I read the language today that's in the agenda. And our company, as you well know, that we already have 2 large projects that's already been approved, Salem Church and Ashcroft. And the The one on Salem Church is probably, when it's built out, will be $40 to $50 million investment. Ashcroft is a multi-million-dollar investment to provide homes. We consider Salem Church to be an affordable housing concept for new homeowners. And the reason I bring curb and gutter up, and I might have mentioned this last month, for our investors that we represent, curb and gutter adds an extra $7,000 to $15,000 per lot in most cases, and that cost continues to rise. And for new homeowners, they pass that cost on to them. And in an area that will qualify for no curb and gutter, that's the part I don't understand in the language. I was hoping somebody could answer when we get into it. If we have a project that's approved through DENR, NCDEQ, for detention ponds, biocels, or whatever means they require by the state law, is the city, when they review that, are they going to take that into consideration, the planning department? The language is a little bit vague. It looks like you're either going to get approved or denied. And just like I mentioned last time, there's a lot of talk about Reidsville right now. And it's good for future growth, housing, and there's a lot of people looking at this area to invest their money. And I think it may be a couple more coming. And I'd like you to take that curb and gutter section under serious consideration. And maybe if you could talk to me a little bit about that as you get into it later in the meeting, to see sort of where we're at with that, because I really don't understand that part of it right now. Thank you.
Good evening, Council, Mr. Mayor, Madam Manager, Don Powell, 356 Fawcett Road, Reidsville. I own a business here in Reidsville. I build custom homes. My office is 1315 Freeway Drive. The last time that I talked to you, I gave you some statistics. One was that there's more people in this county over the age of 60 than there are under the age of 18. That's a problem for economic development. We need people that fill up all demographic groups. But tonight I'd like to give you two more statistics that I bring with me. One is that since 1960 until today's date, Reidsville has grown by 300 people. And that's through 2 forced annexations. Okay? And 59, be 60 next year in June, high school class, senior class graduations. Which tells me that we're not retaining the people that we're educating. We're spending that money and it's going to benefit other communities. The last one is that the average median household income in Reidsville, North Carolina, as today's date, is $42,000. That's gross. When you take the taxes off at 15%, 7.5 of that being for Social Security, then you have a disposable income of about $37,000. If you put curb and gutter in a development, or you make that happen, then that's passed on to the homeowner, whoever buys the property. You're looking at $1,000 a month with house payment, insurance, and taxes. That's $12,000 a year, so now their disposable income drops to $25,000. You can see, gentlemen, that ladies, that every dollar counts. And so what we find tonight, Reidsville's position is that we're almost like the chicken and the egg. See, nobody ever questions whether we need the egg or whether we need the chicken. It's all about which came first. And tonight, we need business in Reidsville. We need doctors, we need restaurants. We need business for people to come here. But we can't get that without people. So we've got to get people. You can't do anything about business. You can't attract business because it's predicated upon population in most cases. But you can do something about getting people here because we can offer them affordable housing. Now, Reidsville has nothing to offer the age group between 25 and 50. If they did, we'd be full of people. We're not. And so the only thing that we can do is reduce our regulations so that we can present affordable housing here. And to be quite honest with you, I met with a group of investors last week, on Thursday of last week, and the amount of investment that we're talking about, that projects that are potentially coming, already in works, is $500 million. That's a tremendous amount of growth for this area. So the actions that you take tonight will be closely watched by this group of investors to see if the city is indeed in tune with growth or whether you're satisfied with the status quo. I hope that you'll take a close look at these policies and make some arrangements so that people can come here and build and we can grow. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Nicole Kennerly with Kennerly Engineering and Design. I'm actually out of Winston-Salem, but I have clients in this area. And I just wanted to quickly talk to you, again, concerning the curb and gutter and some of the things that are in your UDO that make it very prohibitive for developers and especially smaller developers and smaller companies like mine to work here because it makes it it is not cost effective, I guess is a way to put it. I don't have a bunch of statistics, but in my 30 years in this business, I will tell you that places like Reidsville, Summerfield, all these areas up here north of Greensboro, this is where a lot of people want to move because they don't want to be in the city. They don't want to be in the concrete jungle. They want a little bit more for their money. But when you insist on the infrastructure, whether it's, bringing water and sewer to the site or through the site or mandating that they have to have curb and gutter and there's no options available, it does limit the people that can develop here, the people that can afford to move here. I know from experience that many times the people with the biggest pockets that will put the infrastructure in don't always build the most quality homes, okay, and the structures. It's unfortunate, but it's true. So, the developers that we work with for the most part are smaller. They look for properties that maybe don't even have sewer, but they have water so that they can do larger lots that many people are looking for. They're looking for that slower feel than in the city because that's where they work and that's where they are all day and they want to come home and relax and have peace. And so, when they have to pay this price here to get the same thing they're getting there and they have to travel, they're not moving. So that's just kind of what I've seen in the 30 years I've been in this business. This is a beautiful area, and I think that you guys deserve to have the growth. So I would just implore you to think about, not saying never, but maybe having some options and putting it where it makes sense. Where there's already curb and gutter, sure, tie it in. But if it's not already there, is it really needed? And on the environmental standpoint, it's actually worse on the environment to have that much impervious area in some of these neighborhoods. And I think someone's going to come up behind me and talk about that as well. But thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak?
Hey, good evening. My name's TJ Landis. I'm with Ferris Partners. We're a land surveying firm. I live at 295 Mathis Road in Pilot Mountain. We work with a lot of clients throughout the state, developers specifically, and I'm here to speak specifically about the tree buffer requirement on new parcels. I think currently it's 50 foot for public roadways and developed residences, and then 25 on undeveloped land or non-developed residents. Just from a development standpoint, I understand the purpose and the intent of the buffer, and I understand, but just from a cost standpoint and from a development standpoint, it slows the development process, and it obviously puts more cost on the development project. Not to mention that a lot of times when you get construction happening and you're going in there and you're getting close to that edge of the trees or whatnot, a lot of those trees, if you compress roots, you can choke out a root system of a tree, and that will ultimately kill the tree. So you're kind of, you know, you could have some, just basically you could have a 50-foot buffer that looks, it's not going to hold up, and it's not going to basically do the intent that it was created to do. I think maybe another practical solution maybe to come in at the back end, if that is the intent, and to have a requirement maybe to put back some sort of buffer, but to have it up front where you can't even start your construction project until you get a full set of approved plans. It slows everything down, and time costs money, and I know some developers get a bad rap sometimes, but I mean, we're all here because of development, so, but thank you, that's all I have.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. John Ford, Lamonaco Investments, address 7 Corporate Center Court, Greensboro, 27408. I just briefly wanted to tell you, we're a local real estate development and investment company, and we develop residential and mixed-use communities throughout the Carolinas. And I've been in contact with some staff and some council members about some of the agenda items tonight, including development standards and some of the policies. And I just want to first echo some of the sentiments that were delivered already by prior speakers about the curb and gutter, and the council and the city to look at ways to revise some of the requirements there for the reasons that they've already identified. But given the time frame, I also wanted to bring up 2 other areas that we have concerns about. And one is, so we have, one of the properties we have under contract out here is on Ashcroft Drive. It's about 24 acres. And we're still looking at the design elements and how we're going to move forward on that, and timing and all that. One of the things that we've identified is that there's going to be a need for some capital improvements off-site on our project. And so I'm not sure exactly what the procedure is here in the city of Reidsville. We haven't developed a property here yet. And I don't think you've had any real development in this particular area in quite some time, but how we would go about achieving potentially a development agreement or some sort of a LID or something like that. In other words, so for instance, we're going to be required to do a bore and jack and extend water service from across Freeway Drive to bring the water loop. You guys, I think you have a 16-inch main on the other side, and we're going to bring tap into that and bring it across. But that's not just going to serve our property, it's going to serve future properties that are over on that side of Freeway Drive as well. So this will serve the city of Reidsville, ourselves, and other future development on that side. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention and ask if there's some vehicle that you have available to us. And then the second point is related to just sort of the policies and procedures moving forward, regards to the design, civil design and development portion, and also site improvements and the process for inspections and certifications. It's a little unclear to us still, even looking at your process and talking with staff as to how that works. And I know there's a work in progress right now within your staff as far as who's handling what. But my understanding currently is that there's no inspection process from the city of Reidsville, that our civil engineer, project engineer, would be responsible for inspecting and certifying the public roads and storm and utilities. And so we just want to have a better understanding of the process. So again, I echo with the comments on the curb and gutter and some of the other policies, but I just wanted to bring those other 2 items up as well.
I got a question. So I've spoken to you, but we talked about the curb and gutter policy in the Ashcroft community, and you conveyed back to me that given the opportunity to move away from that curb and gutter policy, which would create a storm water infrastructure, you stated to me that there could be a potential for a change of what you would do with that subdivision versus the townhomes. And the reason that we have so many subdivisions, roughly 13 right now, and they're all townhomes, tightly compacted, or single-family homes with 3-foot setbacks, is because the developer has to be able to recoup that additional $17,000+ cost.
And with the costs that go with, associated with developing this neighborhood, that is the reason that essentially your only option is to build roughly 200 townhomes to try to get that cost down, to even recoup the funding, let alone make a profit. Is that
That's correct. That's correct. And we're looking at other properties out here as well. So depending on the property, some of those design standards are more applicable than others. But certainly what you said is accurate. We're trying to achieve a higher density in order to recover some of those costs so that we don't have to pass those on to the consumer.
When you look at other areas that have these policies, typically these policies are left before the civil engineer to make that decision across the board. And that's reviewed by DEQ as well as the Army Corps of Engineers to be sure we're getting the proper grading, the proper stormwater runoff. And other areas that may have this would be, say, someone like the city of Greensboro. But when you require that, a $350,000 house here is going to bring $550,000 in the city of Greensboro, correct?
Correct.
So we haven't built a foundation yet to create a value in this community in order to start asking for things such as curb and gutter, the issues, and we spoke about the ability for you to go ahead and start clearing that piece of property. Right. It's not cost effective to leave that buffer in there as well, because then the logger's not going to come back and you'll be faced with, it could be up to $100,000, $250,000 in hauling fees and disposal fees of that buffer. So if certain things like this aren't taken into consideration, it could lead to us losing another development such as yours, because during the time you're under contract,
yeah,
you're not
I think
able to do
for
that.
us and for other potential investor developers, we need a reason to come out to the area. Obviously, there's other locations in cities and properties that we have under contract and that we're developing, and so we're looking for a reason to start sooner here. And some of these things that we're talking about incentivize us, not just for this property, but for others as well.
That's correct.
To engage, right?
Yes,
to do it sooner.
We spoke about those.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, City Council. My name's Tim Kennerly. I'm Senior Engineer at Kennerly Engineering and Design in Winston-Salem. Here to talk about curb and gutter also. I just want to give you guys kind of a quick environmental overview of what a roadside ditch does for you. The worst pollutants come off the edge of the pavement. You have heavy metals, you have oil, you have antifreeze. It comes over, you have a shoulder that's grassed. It will dissipate in the grass. Water goes into the ditch. You get some quality treatment from the ditch. You get some infiltration. Slows down. You don't have all these pollutants running through a pipe and then eventually into a creek. So a roadside ditch is a very wonderful thing. I'm not an environmentalist, but I'm speaking as one right now, that you get more benefit from a roadside ditch than you do from a curb, just because you have the water getting treated by the grass, it gets infiltration, and it slows down. You don't have erosion if it's done properly. Any questions?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak?
I'm Joseph Shuford. My address is 303 Parkway Street, Greensboro, North Carolina, 27401. I'm an attorney in Greensboro, and I represent companies who have invested in Reidsville's growth and want to continue investing in Reidsville's growth. I'm here to speak on their behalf about the curb and gutter proposal and the clear cutting proposal. Sort of set the table for my comments here. Reidsville is in a really good and unique position. It's near US 29, and it's in between Greensboro to the south and the casino to the north. The companies I represent see big potential in Reidsville and have tentative plans for over $100 million worth of investment in the area over the next few years, which is really exciting potential. But I mentioned that It's a good thing that Reidsville is close to Greensboro. It's also close to Greensboro, and construction materials cost the same in Greensboro as they do in Reidsville. But in Greensboro, developers can get a lot more revenue from rents and property sales than they can in Reidsville. So how does Reidsville differentiate itself? How does it capture and keep those interested developers? Well, it needs to be more nimble in its approach to development than Greensboro and other areas. And it also cannot impose the same costs that Greensboro does. Otherwise, those developers are just going to want to stay in Greensboro. For the curb and gutter proposal, we encourage the council to approve a flexible approach which allows the developers, along with their professional engineers, to decide what the right approach is for their development, whether to keep the curb and gutter or whether it makes sense to try and avoid those costs by coming up with other creative solutions. For the clear cutting proposal, we encourage the council to do away with all buffer requirements at all. And here's why. First, telling me that I can't harvest trees on my property is the same as telling me that I can't use my land for another lawful purpose. It's a governmental taking of property. And if the council is worried about aesthetics, the focus should be post-development. Anything up to that point is a full-blown taking and may subject the city to lawsuits and litigation. Second, to make the development worthwhile here, the developers need to use the entire piece of their property. And so they need the ability to cut up to the edge of their property, and the buffer prevents that. Third, the bond part of the proposal imposes an additional cost on developers. How can Reidsville differentiate itself and compete with Greensboro? By avoiding extra costs like this one. The opportunity that I mentioned at the top and that you heard Mr. Powell talk about is real, it's exciting, and it's big, but the results of that opportunity right now are just hypothetical. The investors and developers are paying close attention to this issue, and we need your support to turn this opportunity into a reality. Thank you all.
Good evening, council members. My name is Mark Hinkle. I live in Oak Ridge at 7604 Daltonshire Court. A few weeks ago, I spoke about the challenges of preparing commercial sites along our commercial corridors like Freeway Drive. Tonight I want to follow up, not to repeat the same points, but to share how our current regulations are actively holding Reidsville back from the growth we say we want. We need to ask ourselves, why is all this growth happening around us while we stay stagnant or worse, regress?
Can you speak up a little bit?
It's because we need change. Businesses like Waffle House and other regional or national chains are constantly evaluating where to expand. They're not just comparing real estate, they're comparing ease of development. They want sites that are cleared, graded, and ready to build. When they find cities that offer clear, predictable path to construction, they move quickly. When they find uncertainty or excessive red tape, they simply go elsewhere. Right now, our regulations send the opposite message. They make it hard to clear a lot without buffers or engineered plans, and even after investors take on the cost and risk to purchase land, clear it, and bring in utilities, the city still asks for a bond. That bond, on top of everything else, feels like less like responsible oversight and more like a penalty for believing in the city. It's a slap in the face. It tells investors, we don't trust you, or worse, we don't really want you here. But the truth is, these investors are already taking a huge risk. In a slow growth town like ours, the risk is magnified. They're the ones willing to believe in Reidsville's future, to put their own money on the line to create opportunities, jobs, and tax revenue. When we pile on layers of red tape and uncertainty, they move on to towns that welcome them, and we lose another chance at growth. We can't afford to treat Reidsville like Charlotte or Raleigh. Those cities are managing growth. We're trying to create it. Their regulations are built to slow things down. Ours should be built to open things up. Reidsville needs single-family homes. It needs restaurants, retail, and jobs. It needs to look and feel like a place that welcomes new investment. It needs leaders who are willing to say, yes, we want you here. And that starts by streamlining the process, reducing unnecessary barriers, and showing that this city is open for business. Please take a fresh look at the UDO. Let's find a balanced way to protect our community while still making it feasible to prepare and market these sites. Let's send a clear message to investors and business alike. Reidsville's ready to grow, and we're ready to help make it happen. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak?
Good evening. Excuse me. Good evening. My name is Frank Birdie at 205 Lachey Drive in Reidsville, North Carolina. Again, thank you, Mr. Mayor, City Council, and fellow citizens for allowing me to speak and hopefully sharing a few useful insights on the subject of curb and gutter. I know you've heard a lot about that tonight. I'll try to, I've been crossing things out that I had made notes about because a lot of people have already spoken on this subject, obviously. But just to reiterate a few things and hopefully shed some light on some specific items, our curb and gutter policies are not economically feasible for our city or our residents. And it's a missed opportunity to embrace modern and environmentally conscious solutions. First, let's talk about the economic reality. Curb and gutter systems are expensive, with costs ranging from $20 to $40 per linear foot. This does not even include the storm drains and downstream controls. These costs do not just disappear. They are passed directly to the home buyer, driving up housing prices and making our city less affordable. For developers and investors, this mandate can be the deciding factor between a project that is viable and one that simply cannot be built, stifling much-needed housing and economic growth. We should not implement a policy that prices out our own neighborhoods and discourages developers and other investors in investing here in our city. Second, the assumption that curb and gutter systems are the best way to manage stormwater is simply outdated and simply wrong. As we've heard from far more intelligent people than myself earlier about some of the things, specifics regarding these. Traditional systems by design are meant to quickly whisk water off the streets and into the storm drains, which then discharge high volume of unfiltered water and pollutants directly into our local waterways. This does not filter pollutants, it concentrates them, harming our natural environment. In contrast, modern green infrastructure offers a much superior approach. Instead of one-size-fits-all concrete solution, we should prioritize environmentally conscious alternatives that recharge our groundwater and filter pollutants naturally, such as vegetated swales, permeable pavement, and rain gardens, as mentioned earlier. These green infrastructure solutions are not just buzzwords, they're proven methods for effective stormwater management. I'm going to delete a bunch of this because I want to get to the last page very quickly. In conclusion, I'd like to share some real numbers with you as it pertains to a specific development that's currently ready to build. This is one of 13 approved developments currently in the city limits. Park Place was purchased by an investment group earlier this year for about $1.5 million. There's an opportunity to build, I need like 10 seconds, to build 70 much-needed townhomes in this development. Based on land construction and other normal factors, these units cost around $330,000, sell for $365,000. If curb and gutter are required, this cost will rise to about $385,000 per unit and would create about a $20,000 per unit deficit to the developer, that group which I'm a part of. Hopefully this is a simple example of how a mandate of curb and gutter would eliminate the possibility of building this development out, as well as the loss, or the city losing out on an additional $26 million worth of tax-based revenue. Thank you for your time.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? Before we move on to new business, we'll take about a 10-minute break. I'd like to call the meeting back to order. Next item on the agenda, consideration of amending Chapter 17 Traffic, Section 17-75 Parking in Central Business District to reflect formation of new Reidsville Downtown Social District. Enclosure 5, Chief Ray Gibson.
Thank you, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, council members, City Manager Moore, thank you all. So if you remember back in March and April, we brought to you, we had to amend the downtown parking central district to comply with Senate Bill 300 because we had some issues with parking on Scale Street. Well, since then, we've had issues with surrounding streets as well with parking overnight and parking extended periods of time, like days. And so I'd like for y'all to consider encompassing the new Reidsville Downtown Social District to also encompass the no parking after midwork from 12 to 4 a.m. And it would read, parking of any vehicle, trailer, or vehicle towing a trailer in the central business district between the hours of 12 midnight and 4 a.m. is prohibited. The streets encompass the same area as the downtown Reidsville Social District, which is shown on a map dated July 8, 2025 that is available in the office of the city clerk. Questions?
Any questions of Chief? Thank you, Chief.
Y'all.
Do we have a motion on the amendment of parking? Motion? And we have a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, raise your right hand. Next item on the agenda, consideration of changes to personnel policy regarding promotional pay and revisions to accrual table. Enclosure 6, Chris Phillips, Assistant City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Your packet has two memos, and I'm going to go over both of them, and then if you choose to do so, you can approve these changes to the personnel policy. But the first memo I'm going to talk about is the second one in your book, and it's about the accrual rates for vacation, sick leave, and holiday. So the policy as it stands has accrual rates based on the number of hours you work, but we had it based on, it's all keyed off a 40-hour week, but then if you work more hours or less hours, your accruals are different. And the current chart had adjustments for fire because they work more hours than 40 a week. But we never adjusted for the police that work 171 28-day cycle. So they work 171 hours, which equates to 42.75 hours a week instead of 40. So their accrual rate should have been a little bit higher than the 40-hour rate, and the table captures that. And if approved, we'll start accruing at a little bit of a different rate for the police officer. So it just updates for those folks that work that different schedule. The second memo, which is the first one in the book, is about our current promotion policy. So the way the policy is right now, if you're promoted through a competitive process at the city to a higher level of pay, you get a 5% raise or to the minimum of the new pay grade. So it doesn't matter if you go up 1 pay grade or if you go up 4 pay grades, you get 5% or to the minimum of the new pay grade. But the grades are 5% apart already. So if it goes up more than 1 grade, then the promotion is really for a higher level of responsibility. And so we've got some promotions that if you look at it, the person could go up 4 or maybe 5 grades, which shows a pretty big jump in their responsibility. Sometimes it's going from not having any employees they supervise to supervising a whole team of employees. So the gap between where they are and where they're going represents that level of increased responsibility. And so really think instead of a flat 5%, which honestly may not be worth it to an employee to take a promotion at 5%, it should be 5% per grade. So if an employee is going to go move 4 grades, they would go, 4 times 5, 20% is what they would get for that big of a jump. And sometimes it is just 1 grade, which the 5% would capture. But the policy has changed to reflect that. The new policy would say that an employee who's promoted shall receive a pay increase in base salary of 5% per grade or to the minimum of the new pay grade, whichever is greater. And honestly, if you do 5% per grade, it's going to be more than the minimum, and no matter how you do the math. But we left that in there just in case somehow it didn't reach the minimum. But that's a change there, and I think that will encourage more people to look at promotions, especially when it's a big jump in responsibility. We should be compensating them for that, taking on those new duties. But those are the two changes. I'll be glad to answer any questions. And again, you can vote on them as one, acceptance of revisions.
Any questions, Chris?
I would just say I couldn't agree more, and we need to do everything we can to retain the employees we can and promote from within, so thank you.
Okay, yes, sir.
And also, I would like to say that should increase morale, where people will stay here.
Any other questions or comments? What's the pleasure of council?
I make the suggested motion to revise the city personnel policy to include the change in promotional pay increases and to leave accrual rates as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, raise your right hand.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item, consideration of placement of recently annexed Salem Church Road property into the city election district. Enclosure 7, City Manager Moore.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Back in July, City Council annexed into the city a 48-acre parcel of land off Salem Church Road, where the developer plans to build homes. We were contacted by Elections Director Ms. Paula Seamstra with the Rockingham County Board of Elections, asking which of the city's 2 voting districts the City Council would like for the new parcel to be included. Since the parcel includes an existing house, it was decided to go ahead and have Council make this determination sooner rather than later. If you recall, Council approved redistricting back in 2023 to make the election districts, District A and District B, closer in size. With the new redistricting, the population of District A at the time was still smaller than District B by about 725 voters. Salem Church Road also appears geographically to be closer to District A. Therefore, staff is recommending that Salem Church Road parcel be included in District A. Ms. Seamster said she only needs a letter stating council's approval, and eligible voters in the existing House would be able to vote in the November's municipal election. If council agrees with this recommendation, the following motion is suggested to include the recently annexed Salem Church Road property into city's District A for elections. And we also, our city clerk, I want to give her a thank you. She reached out to our city attorney, also the attorneys that did our redistricting back in 2023, and the School of Government, and they all came up with this recommendation based on population, if council desires.
Any questions of Manager Moore? What's the pleasure of council?
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to include the recently annexed Salem Church Road property into the city's District A for elections.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, raise your right hand. Next item, discussion on city's clear cutting policy, enclosure 8, through Bigelow Planning and Community Development.
Thank you all again. Before I start on the report that staff put together, I would just like to mention that tonight, council's just having a discussion on the items that will be presented, the different options that I'm putting forth for you. You can accept all of the recommendations, some of the recommendations, none of the recommendations. You can piecemeal it together, suggest text changes to me. All we're looking for is a motion directing staff to pursue a text amendment, whether that be a middle ground option, the option to eliminate the policy entirely, or the option to keep the policy as it currently exists.
Staff has been asked to review and amend the City of Reidsville's current clear-cutting policy in the Reidsville zoning ordinance. As our city continues to grow and develop, it is essential that our land management practices balance economic development with environmental stewardship, community well-being, and long-term sustainability goals. Our current clear-cutting policy states that a tree buffer of 50 feet shall be required for undeveloped properties along public roadways and property boundaries adjacent to all developed properties, while only a 25-foot buffer is required along property boundaries adjacent to undeveloped properties. It shall be unlawful to remove trees from undeveloped properties within this required buffer zone prior to the approval of a site plan, subdivision plan, or other authorized development plan or permit for the property. If development approval is obtained, then no buffer is required. Additionally, the following requirements exist within our current ordinance. The required tree buffer zone shall not exceed 20% of the tract net of public road right-of-ways and any required conservation easements. Perimeter buffer zones that adjoin public roadways shall be measured from the edge of the public road right-of-way. Properties in which the total acreage prior to the adoption of this ordinance is 2 acres or less are exempt from these requirements. A survey of individual trees is not required. This ordinance will not deny reasonable access into and within the subject property, and forestry activities on a property that is taxed on the basis of its present use value as agricultural, horticultural, or forest land under Article 12 of Chapter 105 of the North Carolina General Statutes, and forestry activity that is conducted in accordance with the forestry management plan prepared and approved by a forester registered pursuant to Chapter 89B of the North Carolina General Statutes are hereby excluded from the requirements of this section. Furthermore, violation of this ordinance requires, the language specifically in our ordinance is requires, staff to withhold any development approval or building permit for the property owner of a property for a period of 3 years after the completion of the removal of trees from a required buffer perimeter zone, if the removal of trees results in the removal of substantially all or all of the trees that were protected under this ordinance from the tract of land for which the permit or plan approval is sought. Staff has researched the clear-cutting policies of other regional municipalities, and we make the following suggestions regarding the amendment. I believe there are 4 suggestions. So again, you can pick of the 4 which ones you would like us to pursue. 1 and 2, 1, 2, and 3, all of them, none of them. Our proposed considerations are as follows. Number 1, reduce the forested buffer perimeter requirement to a flat 25 feet from the varying 50 to 25 feet, preserving all existing language that the buffer shall not exceed 20% of the total parcel net acreage. Number 2, allow an exemption for parcels to be cleared completely if they are developed or obtain a development approval within 3 years of the date of issuance of the clear-cutting permit. A bond equivalent to the cost of replanting the buffer shall be required before any buffer removal activity occurs or the clear-cutting permit is issued. This bond will be used to replant the buffer if development or a development approval is not obtained within the specified time period. If development approval is obtained, then the bond will be released to the property owner or the holder of the clear-cutting permit. And I can speak a little bit really quickly on why we chose to implement a potential bond. The city has used bonds for landscaping and buffer requirements for years. That is a way for us to have checks and balances to ensure that the activity that's promised is going to occur. And if the activity does not occur, we have recourse to go back in, use that money to replant the buffer. So it's giving developers an opportunity for 3 years to seek their development approval, go through the steps. They can go ahead and clear the parcel, no buffer. It helps with the marketing of the parcel. It's not requiring them to have to come back in later at an additional cost to remove those trees a second time. Number 3, preserve all language identifying enforcement proceedings for violations of the ordinance and maintain a 3-year development denial period for violators. This 3-year period is currently in place, which is why we also recommended a 3-year grace period for developers who wish to clear an entire parcel to obtain the proper approvals. If we're going to withhold for 3 years, it seems reasonable to grant them a 3-year period to get their development approvals. 4th and lastly, preserve all other language regarding buffer zones that adjoin public roadways, the surveying of individual trees, forestry activity, and exemptions for properties of less than 2 acres that existed prior to the original adoption of this ordinance. Staff would like to further note, this ordinance was adopted in 2006 following considerable input from the local community. Across Reidsville, parcels were being cleared for profit without any development intent. For apparent environmental and aesthetic reasons, the public petitioned the planning department at the time to institute a clear-cutting policy that would protect and preserve the character of the city. Thus, our current policy was introduced and has remained in place for nearly 20 years. Staff asked the City Council to consider the proposed policy amendments and provide us direction on which course of action you would like us to pursue. Council may choose to pursue, again, all, some, or none of the recommended changes discussed herein, such that any amendment to this policy considers equally the interest of the community and the long-term development and growth goals of the city. A motion from City Council is required to pursue the amendment process, and staff recommends that the policy amendment be pursued as presented. If council so chooses, again, in lieu of this amendment request, the 2 additional alternatives are, first, to remove the ordinance entirely. Second is to keep the ordinance in place as it currently exists. If either of these options are preferred by council, staff does recommend including the language that all state approvals shall be obtained and submitted to the planning department for review prior to any clear-cutting activity or permits being issued. And that's to ensure state compliance.
And Mayor and Council, if I could, Ms. Bigelow, do you care to tell council kind of the next step, whichever way they go, so they know that it would go planning board based on general statutes?
Yes, so following the general statute procedure for text amendments for the zoning ordinance, again, this is just a discussion tonight. You would make a motion requesting that staff investigate this one way or another, to keep it, to remove it, or to find a middle ground. After that, it would go back to staff. You would work up a formal text amendment. That text amendment would go to planning board for recommendation, as all text amendments do, before returning to you most likely in December. Depending on the feedback we receive from you tonight, if it takes staff a little bit longer to put together that amendment, you could see it in January, more than likely December. And if you have any questions, I'll answer them to the best of my ability.
I don't necessarily have questions for you, but more of questioning and comment amongst my fellow council members here. And I want to be clear that I'm certainly not against the middle ground, but the middle ground must make sense in order to work. As we heard tonight during the public commenting section, you know, a 50-foot buffer or a 25-foot buffer does absolutely nothing. You know, one of the things that I had suggested to this is you allow the developer to come in, clear cut the property, obtain the proper state permits, erosion control, stump the property, and plant the property back in grass. And then you require that to be maintained just as you would mowing your yards or grass and any of the regulations that are already done here. Because what you have to define in what is the proposed middle ground number 2 is development of the property. So development can be seen in 2 ways. 1, just clearing it and grading it. 2, building a structure on it. So what are we considering developed here? And as we heard from multiple people, requiring these bonds and then not knowing when that out parcel would sell. So if I clear a property that I have, place it for sale, it could sell 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, 7 years. And what we certainly have to consider is we all learned a little bit about the 20-year cycle of the economy and that we're on the 5-year downturn of the cycle. Remember that from the last council meeting. So you're getting into that area of there's a potential that this properties could sell, they could sell. But we've got a lot of homework to do and a lot of changes to make on our end to foster that growth. As I think we heard, we had our 2 largest developers and investors in here tonight to watch what's being said here. Their representatives is here. One's still sitting in the back there. I've had countless conversations with these people. And so I know that some of my fellow council members are adamantly against this and
see this as a middle ground. But what I would say to that is, what expertise does that come from? When you've listened to engineer after engineer, surveyors, developers, who have told you this is not how it works in the other areas. So what I feel that is a middle ground gives everybody the opportunity so that we don't have to worry about someone clear cutting for profit, and preserving our aesthetics would be that you would eliminate all this jargon, as everybody talked about the complexity of it and how hard it was to understand. But you would simply allow clear cutting and getting that parcel site ready, which would mean you cut the trees, you have to stump the trees, and then you have to sow grass and maintain that out parcel so that if we miss the buck this time, when the economy comes back around, guess what? It's there and ready to sell. Because, I would notate a couple of things here. We have 11 approved subdivisions, multiple subdivisions that have been approved since 2015 and greater, for a total of about 1,500 to 1,700 homes here. Some of these subdivisions got their approval process, cut the timber, and hightailed it out of here. And I've spoke to those developers. Let's use the Liberty Road project. Everybody said, D.R. Horton's going to build here, and we're going to get 400 new homes. And we followed the policy as is, or even such amendment that's Amendment 2 that kind of aligns with that. And what did we get? Nothing but trees cut, stumps growing, and it's overgrowing. So if an investor is serious and wants to seek the opportunity to clear a piece of property, then he won't have a problem going ahead, cutting the trees. Takes 3 months, 4 months to get an erosion control plan, but he can't cut the trees until he gets an erosion control plan, but get a grading plan approved to allow the stumping of the property, and then to sow that property back while their engineers are working, or if their engineers are actively working, they would go ahead and do what's called site ready. They would grade that property out, they would make it flat, and then they would sow the grass. So why would we as a board here not want to create a true middle ground that's going to foster growth and spark the growth here and speed that up? Because the other thing that we didn't talk about here and touch base on is the time, which Don Powell talked about that the last time, from the time of an idea to the conception of it is about 24 to 30 months. So you can't even, if you create these policies, you're going to stifle that and slow the ability down to create that site-ready parcel. And we all know that rooftop commercial customers, Waffle House, Dario's, Dunkin' Donuts, Caribou, and all of those, look specifically for the properties that are cut, ready, flat, and infrastructure on there, or infrastructure nearby to be placed on there. And in my opinion, I don't think that we created any of these policies out of what I would call fact-based or statistic-based of what promotes growth, because we heard it from the professionals here tonight who gave us that information and told us what we need to do. And as I was listening to that and then listening to the income of our community and listening to the lady who spoke about how we're qualifying for all this infrastructure upgrades on grant-based needs and all these things, I would think that we would see that as an importance to promote as much growth as possible here. And I made a couple of notes, that I'm just going to hit the highlights, and I'm not going to go into, I think you guys heard what everybody else had to say. But, the assistant city manager, Chris, talked about pay raises and these certain things. But where has our tax revenue been over the last 10, 12 years? And where is our budget? We're in budget, but are we able to do everything we want to do? Are we able to do things without borrowing money? And as we have to continue to take care of our employees here, guess what we need? Taxable income. So how do we get that taxable income and grow that revenue base? By having site-ready parcels without restrictions and encouraging people as our developers and investors that are here today to come into this community. And these policies are no different than anywhere else that they are working at. We are the only ones who are creating more stringent policies with a population of 13,000 people here. And every day we hear from our downtown business merchants. We've got about 18 to 21 businesses downtown and about 60 plus vacant buildings. We lost several of those businesses. And how are we going to retain those and promote more growth? Is by cutting the red tape, being concise and to the point, and making it a developer and builder friendly. And Barbara, me and you and the mayor sat in the CED banquet and we listened to what Senator Berger had to say about our UDOs aligning with our neighboring communities, and that the actions that we have here is not just an action just solely in the city of Reidsville, but an action that goes outside the county and has a regional effect outside. And so for that, I think a middle ground, and I think many of the developers would be to allow them to clear this property, plant grass, and go through the proper channels, and then you have the site-ready property for the developer to buy. Because you don't know when they're going to build the building or when it's going to sell. It can sell instantly. It can sell 7 years from now. So are we going to go have a developer spend $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, put up a bond, and then he thinks that if we don't build a building at that appropriate time, we're going to go back and plant a buffer around it? How much sense does that make? And do you think that investors or developers would actually go for that? I don't think so, and I think you heard that tonight from many of them and their representatives that are here. So we're faced with an obstacle or a challenge, or however we want to convey this. But the challenge is to do the opposite of what we did in 2006, 20 years ago, because these same policies that was implemented 20 years ago are the same ones that are preventing us from growing now. And so that, my fellow colleagues, I encourage you to take action, and bold action, to move forward, to deliver on the promises that each and every one of us made to the people that were here, the people that took the time to come here, and the very people that we depend upon to make this community grow. I know when I campaigned for council, I campaigned on these policies, and I campaigned on this UDO, and promised and vowed to fight alongside that man right there, and talked about the issues that we have. No one's trying to pull the wool over anybody's eyes, because you got people who are doing hundreds of millions of dollars of investment here that are here watching tonight to see, do we take the right actions, or do they take and move on to other parcels of property that they have where there's a return on that investment. And I think I've said enough, and I hope you guys get the point.
If I may, I think I can provide just a little bit of clarification from staff end regarding the ordinance and the development of a new policy. So a middle ground, as Councilman Martin has suggested, where we allow clearing of the parcel, replanting of grass, and of course the proper obtaining of all state approvals, in essence, is a removal of our current policy. So if that's the route in which council feels they would like to pursue, staff will pursue that route. But what that will be is not a middle ground. That will be a removal of the policy that we currently have to allow the entire clearing of the parcel. So if you want to look at that as the best approach to the situation from an ordinance standpoint, how that would be reflected in writing in our rules and regulations would be the removal of this policy.
And so I don't disagree with you with that. And what I was talking about, a middle ground, was the proposed considerations of number 2. And I 100% think that we should do away with the existing policy that we have right now, because as we see, for 20 years, it's not working. In a 20-year period, think about the businesses that have came here, and think about the calls that not only have I received as an investor and a landowner in this community, the other ones, but the Waffle House reached out to the city multiple times and said, hey, we want to come to this city and we're looking for site-ready property. And staff called around, they tried to help, but the fact of the matter is Waffle House has a team of realtors. There is no site-ready property here. So guess what? Waffle House moved on. Myself and my partner was one of the people who tried to sell them some property. The same thing happened with Caribou Coffee. The same thing happened with Dario's. So are we here to continue the same policies? Are we here to truly fix our UDO, fix our policies, and promote growth in this community? If we want to continue with the same amendments and say, this is how it's always been, then why did any of us run for council? Why did we just let the same people die out and retire right here and replace them as they leave? Because this is 20 years later, and it's a different time than it was 20 years ago. But the crazy part is, in 2006, we were moving into a recession, and in 2008, we were in a full-blown recession, and nobody was knocking down the doors to get in here. So to think that you was going to implement a policy that was going to be more restrictive has shown very well, because we've implemented that policy and we've been successful to obtain in over a 20-year period roughly 4 or 5 commercial retail businesses. We've got Starbucks, a Cookout, a Tractor Supply, and a Harbor Freight. And look around the community around here. Look at the city of Eden. Eden's had a Cookout, a Harbor Freight, a Tractor Supply, and all these same businesses for over 20 years. And when you look at the position of Reidsville, geographically speaking, and population and income related, that should have been here. But it wasn't. And why was it? Because of these policies and our failures to speak up and say, you know what, it's a new day, it's a new dawn, and it's a lot of different council members on this board now, and it's our job to change these policies, if not to continue with them.
If I might add one final thing from staff, just to clarify again, the proposal of, which item was it? It was number 2, where we allow them to clear cut the parcel within 3 years, obtain the proper approvals with the bond that has been discussed a few times now. If we feel that growth in Reidsville is coming as quickly as all of the professionals in the industry say it is, we can adjust that number if you choose to adopt number 2 as a part of this policy. So if we'd like to give them 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, before we would implement some sort of regulation or enforcement of the replanting of the buffer, just so that council's aware that's an option. 3 years was just what staff recommended to align with the 3-year denial period, but that can be amended as well if you chose to implement that.
So what does this policy number 2, does that mean that there would need to be a building on that structure?
Not necessarily.
Or does that mean that it's a site-ready out parcel?
If they got the proper development approvals, whether that's a subdivision plat, where they're going to go through and get subdivision approval to have multiple parcels for development. I think we've had a few in the past few years that we're looking at that. I believe, if I'm not misquoting, the one on 14 was potentially looking at having a few out parcels on site. If they went through the subdivision process, then yes, that would count as an approval, a development approval for that.
So there's 2 things to that. So one, when you're building a site-ready out parcel, you don't know what that parcel will be. 2, to get such drawings of that, I can attest to that, and many of these other people in here, are at about a bare minimum of about $160,000 for a subdivision. So to think that you don't know what's going to be there, you're going to go spend $60,000 to get full drawings, $160,000 to get full drawings for an out parcel. There's no recouping of that funding. And I think we're, you know, not you, but just staff in general, not staff, but council here, we would be splitting hairs. And if we don't understand what everybody else had to say here, and we don't understand the costs associated with the development as was indicated to each one of us, then we got some serious issues here. And the bottom line is you would almost be cheaper to just build a random building on the property and hope somebody would eventually buy it and tear it down to avoid that. Again, to get engineered drawings, which you would need to get a parcel site ready, and to grade it on top of the purchase of the property on a 4-acre out parcel is going to be $500,000. So until a building gets built there, am I going to spend an additional, Am I going to spend an additional $100,000+ to get site drawings to make sure that my money and my bonds put up is not then used to plant a 25 or 50-foot buffer around that property? So how do we not see that going through all the proper state channels and then planting grass and creating a nice manicured out parcel is not justifiable? Then I give up, because I have no business being here, because obviously everybody else here would be smarter than I am and know more about development and investments and what it is going to take for this community to grow. So you guys have heard enough. You're faced with a decision to do the right thing. You guys have heard many times from the downtown people, the community here, and the outpour of what's going on. And so I think you get the point. Choose as you may, but I would encourage you to choose of what's truly in the betterment of Reidsville and what's truly going to make us grow, what's going to foster growth and revenue here. I think it's very simple. Very simple. You had many professionals here tell you from a place of facts and experience. Thank you.
And if council has any other questions directed to staff, I'd be happy to answer them.
Mayor, I'll be brief for a minute, because I think, and I hear a colleague over here talking, and it's from what he's talking about, it's one-sided. So we've heard him talk about site ready. I understand that. We're dealing with two things, the way I'm looking at, with hearing the developers up here talk and the real estate folks and talk about it. So you're looking at a development, and let's say Ashcroft. Gentleman came up and spoke about Ashcroft. So I've received phone calls on that. And the way I look at it, we got to find a medium here, because I got to listen to both sides. I'm not one-sided. I'm listening to the people that's going to be affected by the development of Ashcroft that live there. I've received phone calls. So they talk about the buffer, and we see the buffer in here. We've heard people come up at the podium and talk about the buffer. So for folks listening, that's here, that's listening on live, that maybe watch it later, what is the purpose of a buffer? Now, let's just say a residential area. I'm not talking about out here on Freeway Drive, where there's some property, somebody wants to buy 15, 20 acres and develop it. There's nothing else around there. I totally understand about site ready, clear cutting it down to having it presentable. I get that. But let's talk about the residential areas, and let's use Ashcroft as an example. So what's the purpose of a buffer? When you see this in here in our policies and our ordinance, what's the purpose of a buffer, that 25-foot or that 50-foot, whatever it's going to be, in a residential area? What's the benefit?
Certainly. So the intent of the buffer, and mind you, we have buffer requirements for many of our uses. So regardless of this particular ordinance, many of the different uses, especially high-intensity or high-density uses, are going to require a buffer anyways. That is part of the development standard for those uses. But in the case of Ashcroft, a buffer would be implemented to separate or provide some semblance of separation from a higher intensity and lower intensity land use. So if Ashcroft, and it does, backs to the east up to Freeway Drive, where you have shops and other centers, businesses, place of business, that is the intent of the buffer in that situation. I could also reference industrial uses. A lot of our industrial uses require buffers. So while it might be beneficial on the front end for the developer who's purchasing and making the parcel site ready to remove those trees, at some point the buffer will need to be reinstalled, whether that's a cost that will fall to the developer who's selling it, or that will fall to the individual who is coming in, purchasing the parcel, and then doing that work. That will be worked out between them, obviously, but the buffer may have to be installed. It's really use dependent, but it generally helps to keep uses of varying intensities separate from one another.
Because one of the concerns that come to my direction was, say you have the development beginning, and so you start the clear cutting process. So now you're going to have all these homes being built behind the existing homes, and I think the way I understand the last meeting that we had, and they discussed that, and then your townhomes are going to be up on your upper end. So the concern was if there's not a buffer and those trees aren't kept there for some type of protection, then they get in there and start clearing it out, cutting everything out, get your bulldozers in, get your graders in. Then they're like, well, my house is going to be showered with red clay dust. And I get that, I understand that. So I think you got to think about that. You got to think about those taxpayers already and their concern with the development going right in their backyard. I get that. The site ready safe out on Freeway Drive, I totally understand that. I think we're looking at a medium that we got to meet here and a common sense approach to it, that what fixes it. So if you have something in place that is in a residential area just like Ashcroft, then what process do these developers need to follow that can protect those homes in the process without clear cutting, unless we get approval, like you said, or the requirement says, yeah, they can cut them down if they do this, if they do that. But I've been receiving calls about that as an example. So that's kind of where I'm at. All right, when you go in here and you have these suggested amendments to it, then I think we need to look at something for the residential area. I don't have a big problem having it site ready somewhere out in Freeway Drive and there's nothing else around it. You buy the property, you clear cut it down, you make it presentable to somebody to purchase.
See, just to be clear, I was speaking strictly of commercial development, not residential development in terms of the buffers. So what we don't have here is a one size shoe fits all, because in residential it's a whole different development versus commercial development. Now I was speaking, and maybe I apologize for not being clear on that. Commercial development. When you develop residential neighborhoods, such as the Ashcroft neighborhood, if you remember when that was presented to us, it was presented that a buffer has to be either A, leave what's there, I've never said take that out, or B, plant that back in a residential neighborhood. And that option is given to the developer. So a lot of times what has to happen in a residential neighborhood, in the grading and development process, that buffer has to be torn down, as we learned earlier, and grading to get the grade, to get your water runoffs, to get everything that has to be done. In the grading process, I can't think of one instance where, unless you have 1,000 acres and you're only developing 300 in it, but if you're maximizing the density of that development, that buffer in Ashcroft is coming down, and then is required in our ordinances, as she stated when that was presented to us a few months ago, then has to be planted back. So we have two different issues here. You have ordinances that pertain to residential development and a clear-cutting policy that pertains to commercial development. But then again, even with this number 2 that's allotted, we still end up with the same issues. Look at Liberty Road. I assume they left a buffer, but look at it. Looks like a nuclear bomb went off over there. And if by these policies right here, they're in compliance with that. So do we think that that is aesthetically pleasing? So what I'm saying is, I don't think it's aesthetically pleasing. And if you couple the fact of what our community looks like now, the financial issues of what our community faces, and then someone does come in and clear cut something and leave it looking like Liberty Road, looks like a nuclear bomb went off, and that does nothing but drive the value of the community down then. So I don't agree with that. I agree that there has to be common sense limitations, and there needs to be a cutting policy for this commercial corridor or commercial development, and then there needs to be a policy for residential development. I think if you come in and obtain all the processes, even for a residential subdivision, and you leave your 25-foot buffer that separates you, I think you should be required to dig those stumps up and plant that field back, because it looks horrible. And a serious investor and developer is going to have no problems doing that whatsoever. So we're not even, in my opinion, talking apples to apples and oranges to oranges. You know, there is things that need to be done for the residential subdivision, and things need to be done for the commercial subdivision. And I don't agree with this because I don't think that it meets the needs of what you guys think that we're trying to do, which is to create a Liberty Road subdivision
debacle from happening? What about the property that's been clear cut over near Sherwood Drive 3 years ago in approved subdivision? We ain't seen a house yet. But based off of this ordinance right here, you can give that exact same thing. It doesn't change anything. The only thing this ordinance does is stifle commercial development in a commercial corridor. That's all. And if I'm wrong, please chime in and say that there are two policies and that we wouldn't continue to be able to do the exact same thing in a residential neighborhood.
So the only comment that I have in regard to the discussion about residential versus commercial is that this policy is in place specifically to protect the areas where commercial and residential come together, where you see them abutting. That's why it specifically states for developed properties and properties of residential use. So when you have, again, commercial development that would abut a residentially zoned lot, that's really the intent of this, is to keep a separation between the two. It's not entirely about aesthetics, although that does play a part in it. It's not entirely about environment, and I do have an advanced degree in environmental science, so I feel comfortable saying that a tree buffer can help slow runoff and erosion from leaving one parcel and coming onto another parcel next door. So, whether that's commercial development where you're moving a lot of land and you've got, an existing dwelling next door or an existing residential subdivision next door, there are things in place with the buffer that can help. While you might have your erosion control in place per the state requirement, that's not always what happens. We have development that we've had the state reach out to us in regard to violations and things where those proper approvals were not obtained. And staff doesn't have a proactive way of tracking down those instances or staying on top of those instances when that doesn't happen. And so the buffer serves, in essence, a secondary means of preventing that erosion or runoff onto a neighboring property as well.
But also when you approve these, they're going to cut these buffers down because those buffers aren't required to be in there. So the grader and the developer is going to cut this down. So the requirement would be, and even as erosion control, planted grass serves a better measure of that versus a tree. Because in a 100-year storm like we've seen here lately, what happens in those areas? There's no grass to slow that erosion down or to slow that storm water down, and they take off between that 25 and 50-foot buffer. So it's not as simple as we are making it out to be. And sometimes you have to tear something down to build it back up. And that's what we're faced with here today, guys, is simply this. You heard from many people this doesn't work. It's not a one-size-shoe-fits-all. There are certain things that need to go to residential and commercial corridors. Well, we're stifled with this. Either we want growth or we don't want growth. Either we want development or we don't. And that's what you and I and everyone else is up here faced with tonight. So if you want to implement a policy that talks about a buffer that is separating a commercial corridor from a residential corridor on that adjacent property line, no problem with it. And the developer wouldn't have a problem with it. If the developer needs, most of the time, would probably have to clear that out, then you face that, you put a requirement in there that makes him put that potential buffer zone back in, upon completion, or put them on a time frame of putting it back in. You don't just take this one instance and say that it's a one-sided story and that we're not looking out for all, because that's not true, and this is not the way that this works. I think I've spelled it out and laid it out. You have what we need to do for commercial subdivisions, residential subdivisions, and a mixed use or that abutting subdivision to create that aesthetic. And a lot of places do require, when you have that heavily commercial area up against a residential area, that is also there not only for erosion control, but also as a sound barrier. So I'm not saying you take those out, or if they're taken out because they're in the way of the grading to meet the proper grading, then you require that particular area to be planted back. to the same extent as what you're doing with the Ashcroft subdivision. It's a 25-foot buffer that plainly states he has the option to leave the existing vegetation or cut it down and plant new back, right? So I don't see how anything that I've said to anybody up here is one-sided, and how it's, to me, is common sense. And so, you know, it's certainly more of you guys than it is me. You make the decision, and we're all held accountable for our actions. And if action such as this stifles or stunts the growth, as you know, there are many people were here tonight, developers and investors, to make the determination, were they going to make investments in this community? There's two people that's in here tonight looking to potentially invest somewhere in a combined value of $400 to $500 million in the next 36 to 48 months. But these policies are contingent upon that in our commercial corridors, but also in our residential, because without residential growth, this commercial investment serves no purpose to any one of them. And you've had these policies in place, and we've built fewer than 250 homes here and since 2015. The county's built 10,000 homes and 4,000 on the books in major subdivisions. So, you know, we have to choose. Are we going to deliver on the promises that we make, or are we going to continue on with 20-year policies? I've said enough, because you guys know which direction you're going to go. And if it's not in the proposal of what I've said that I know is what's going to create growth here, I'm not going to vote for it anyways, and it will pass. So you guys certainly are faced with a decision to make, you know. And again, it's the chicken before the egg or the egg before the chicken scenario.
And if I may, to Mr. Martin's point, he is correct in saying that the current policy we have, you will have situations like Liberty Road where they come in, they get an approval, they do the clear cutting, they do the grading, and then we wait 5, 10, however many years to see vertical development or even horizontal infrastructure put in place. Those things do happen. They happen now. They will happen under an amended policy. They will happen if we remove this policy. It will happen regardless. So he is correct in that. We are going to see that type of activity one way or another. Staff's approach to that is to try to have checks and balances in place to hold developers accountable. Again, you can adopt or reject any number of these recommendations, but we are seeing that now, and we'll continue to see that regardless of which approach we take. Removing the policy, you're likely to see that and staff not have any oversight in regard to the development process for clear cutting. We wouldn't be aware that anything's even going on until we get to the point of a site plan approval or submittal or subdivision submittal. But we have that going on already. We have people who are doing that type of work, clear cutting, without obtaining the proper approvals. So it's a valid point to make. It's going to happen now. It's going to happen then, regardless of what approach you take tonight.
But one thing's for sure, you keep this or take these middle ground policies, it's certainly not going to ease the burden, and it's certainly not going to promote growth here. And I feel like the offers that I have suggested, you know, if a developer takes the time to read those, he's not going to have a problem doing that. And so the reality of it is when you look at all these policies and look at all these situations, simply requiring the proper permits from DEQ, erosion control, requiring anyone who wants to clear cut a piece of property to stump that property, sow that property back in grass until it is what I'm going to call is developed once it's built upon. And if we need 3 policies, one that's for a residential standalone policy, one that is for a commercial corridor or commercial development, and a policy that is for commercial property that abuts to residential property. You may need 3 different policies, and I feel like if we really listen to this, none of us are apart on that because we would all be achieving the same thing.
And that's certainly something you could consider as well if you wanted to, within a middle ground approach, adopt conditions or standards that would exempt commercial properties that do not abut residential. If you wanted to exempt specifically commercial properties on major thoroughfares. Those are all considerations that you can ask staff to look into as we develop a text amendment that's a middle ground option, if you go that route.
Most communities have those wording in these individual breakdowns, and I'm certainly not opposed to that because that's what developers are used to, but the one-size-fits-all or the one-sided approach, I do understand what the community says, but that's not what I'm trying to achieve here. What I'm trying to achieve is a policy in all three categories that doesn't stifle growth and promotes growth here. But the last thing I'm gonna leave you guys with, every single one of these developments that came on board had opposition to speak out against them if it was in their neighborhood. But the same opposition when it came to their neighborhoods, they was for it in other people's neighborhoods. And that's just the way that society is. And you're gonna have collateral damage. You're gonna have dust in the air in any area. And I don't care if you leave a 75-foot buffer. In the summertime, when you're grading and clearing, red dust is going up and over those trees and into those subdivisions and in those homes if you're doing that development against there. So here's what you have. You have a small group that may speak out against these certain items. And it's the same small group who has came in here every single time we've approved the subdivision and told them we're doing what's best for them. And we need this development, but the thing is we do need it. But not a single person has enacted upon the approval process here. I've spoken to almost every single one of these developers, as well as I requested staff to speak to them. And let's be clear, they said curb and gutter, clear cutting, and the cost associated with doing business here. So we say, to be fair to the community or to the city, that these policy that sometimes it's just cost in general. Well, if that is the case and sometimes it's just cost in general, why is there so much development going on all around us? Why is there 4,000 homes being built in Rockingham County right now on the west side? Why has 10,000 homes been built there? As Mr. Schufert stated earlier tonight, the cost to build here or the cost to build Greensboro in terms of building material and labor are the same. So to say that, to be fair to us, there are other cost factors, that's a way to softly put it and lower the concept down that we have missed the mark. And with that, I yield back and I'm done, and choose what you want to do.
So if we make the motion on this, is this just for you to investigate the proposal? And so if we need to change it and come to a common sense middle ground on this thing, you're going to do that in the process?
That is correct.
Yes, yep, it's just for us as staff
move on.
to pursue either a middle option,
Yeah.
removal, or keeping it. One of the three, and we can work on what that middle option looks like. This was just the proposal based on sessions that we've held with you guys, what you might want to consider. So you can ask us to move forward and do a middle ground and not accept any of the conditions that I've presented and work on a totally new middle ground. You could amend it with some of the suggestions from Councilman Martin or Councilman Coates. You could pick and choose, again, if you like number 1, but you're opposed to number 2, you're indifferent to 3 and 4, you can mix and match it. So when you make the motion, it would be a motion directing staff to pursue a text amendment for a middle ground, assuming we do a middle ground, and then you would list which items you'd like us to pursue, 1 through 4, any of those, as well as any additional conditions you've proposed.
I think you would have to take a consensus amongst each member here. You guys know where I stand to know what that direction is to create those policies.
Certainly, and this is your opportunity for discussion. So if you'd like to discuss amongst yourselves before you call a motion.
Well,
I gave 3 middle grounds for each criteria that I think covers every aspect, so you guys know how I feel, so pick and choose.
I think you make a motion and just go back to the drawing board and redo the whole thing. If you can get that done for a common sense part of it, that we can try to please everybody. Whether you do away with the 4 that you've come up with, I think it just needs to be a make a motion, and if we can, just go back to the drawing board and take a consensus from all of us of what we think about it, and including Councilman Martin's part, and see if we can get a common ground on it. I mean, we'd be here all night.
So that makes more sense to me.
So would that be a request for staff to still pursue a middle ground option?
Yes.
Yes.
Mayor and Council, what I may suggest, listening to the feedback and the ongoing discussion, if there is no rush to do this, and it sounds like there's been some very healthy discussion, what you could do is staff can go back to the drawing board. We can work on what we've heard here tonight, take into consideration what Mayor and Council has said, also consideration what the developers have said now that we've heard from them as well. And we can come back at your November meeting with an alternative modification to see if you like that. We can have discussion if you think of something in between. You're welcome to email us, reach out to us if there's something you want to see in there. The only reason we were trying to move forward tonight, if you want it, and this is your decision, was if you wanted to try and get a public hearing, because again, this is not a staff-initiated event. It is general statute that whichever decision you want to take, it has to go before planning board. So if you're okay with us bringing back a different approach next month, with the understanding it would be for discussion again, like you see here tonight, staff is completely okay with that. We just need some direction for council if you need this. If you're wanting this moved on, then it is discussion tonight, or if you want us to take what we've heard from each of you, along with the people who spoke during public comment, we can draft something else for next month for discussion as well.
I'll make a recommendation that be redone for next month. See if we can come up with something.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I think that's fair.
Okay. All those in favor, raise your right hand.
I'll just stay right here because I'm next again.
Oh, you're next. Discussion on city's curb and gutter policy, enclosure 9. Ms. Drew.
Just as last time, to touch base one more time on it, this is just for discussion. We're not voting to adopt anything tonight. This is a recommendation that staff has put forward for a middle ground for the curb and gutter policy that we have, which is strangely housed only in our subdivision regulations, and it's not explicitly housed in a single section. It's kind of sprinkled throughout. So this is our attempt at consolidating those as well. Staff has been asked to review and amend the City of Reidsville's current curb and gutter requirements located within the Reidsville subdivision regulations. As development activity increases, particularly related to residential subdivisions and housing, it is essential that our policies prioritize community well-being and environmental compliance. Our current curb and gutter requirements state that all new subdivisions located both within and outside of the corporate limit have to have curb and gutter installed at the time of development by the developer. So that's a cost on the developer. Currently, there are no exceptions to this requirement for new subdivisions. Curb and gutter is not explicitly identified as a requirement for commercial developments and developments of existing parcels within the city where there is no new subdivision created. To encourage development and increase local housing stock, staff has researched the curb and gutter policies of other regional municipalities, and we make the following suggestions regarding this amendment. For this one, there are 5 different suggestions. Like the previous discussion, you can adopt 1, 2, 3 of them, all of them, none of them, whatever is your pleasure. The first proposed consideration is a density exception for low-density development. Single-family development at a density of less than 6 units an acre will be exempt from curb and gutter. More than 6 units an acre would have to comply with curb and gutter. We also included a density exception for townhomes and multifamily development, with development of less than 8 units an acre being exempt, and developments of 8 units or more an acre having to comply with the curb and gutter standards. The second option, exemptions from curb and gutter requirements may be given for all new developments located in the Troublesome Creek watershed to further alleviate impervious surface restraints and preserve the city's watershed acreage allowance. We are quickly approaching the maximum of our allowance. It's reasonable to believe that in the next 10 to 20 years, we're going to have that allowance, which means no more development in Troublesome Creek down by the lake. In lieu of curb and gutter, vegetated ditch and culverts would need to be installed. Under this ordinance, the underground piping and ditching of yards and ditch lines would not be allowed. Maintenance of all ditch lines would be the sole responsibility of the property owner or the homeowners association if included in the HOA incorporation documents for townhomes or new subdivision developments. And this is on par with what we currently do. So the city doesn't currently maintain ditch lines, so that's not changing anything there. It's not requiring additional maintenance of ditch lines on city's staff. The third option, the planning director and/or city engineers would be given discretionary authority to waive curb and gutter requirements for any residential development when they are presented with a stormwater plan developed and approved by an engineer for the project, indicating that curb and gutter is not required, or that an alternative stormwater conveyance method is acceptable. So I know some of the comments that we heard earlier addressed specifically this. Why not leave it in the hands of the engineer? Third option does exactly that. If we're presented with a plan by an engineer for the project that states curb and gutter is not a requirement, staff has the discretion to accept that in lieu of curb and gutter. Number 4, where curb and gutter infrastructure has already been established within an existing subdivision, development tie-on will be required for any expansion within the community. Exemptions will not be given for development related to the expansion of existing subdivisions. So what that's going to look like, you have a phased development where phase 1 was constructed per the standard with curb and gutter or similar structure. Phase 2 comes along 10 years down the road, 5 years down the road. Phase 2 would be required to tie on to whatever's existing. That's both for aesthetic reasons, but also for stormwater control measure reasons, so that you're not going from an impervious curb and gutter to a vegetated ditch, so on and so forth. Number 5, new curb and gutter will be required within subdivision developments that do not meet any of the presented exceptions. So it's not in the watershed, it does not meet the density exception. They are unable to provide an engineered stormwater plan that says curb and gutter for stormwater control is not required, then they would not be exempt from curb and gutter. We're giving them 3 options to provide to us, stating that they are exempt from curb and gutter for one reason or another. The only reason curb and gutter would have to be installed is if it is part of an existing subdivision where a new phase is being developed and it's already there, and when new subdivisions that don't meet these exemptions. It's the only instance when curb and gutter would be required by the city.
We don't have number 5.
I broke it down, so you had a 4 in your packet. I apologize. 4 and 5 are the same thing. I just changed the verbiage a little bit for clarity, but it's the same thing. It's requiring that tie-on, and it's requiring new curb and gutter.
So what do we consider curb and gutter, for example, Carter Ridge? There's not the old-fashioned curb and gutter like I have in my neighborhood. That's the valley is what they consider that. So that would come back again, depending on where development and the engineer designs the thing says, I don't think we need it. We can do this, or we can do a ditch. That's where it comes in.
That would be where you tackle exemption number 3, I believe, where staff would take an approved stormwater plan that shows valley curb or vegetated ditch and culvert in lieu of curb and gutter. Gotcha. We would accept that in lieu of our standards.
Just say if Carter Ridge was phased out in a phase 4, and there's valley curb in there right now, and the engineer ties on, the engineer says, well, we don't need that, we would do
ditch line that meets that same profile, then that would be allowable.
No. The number 4 option is requiring, if there's existing infrastructure within a development, to have consistency throughout, what you would have to tie on. So you'd follow through with what's already in place.
So let's talk about that, talk about the Jordan watershed, and let's use Park Place project with that. And let me be clear that I have a vested interest in this project, but I want to point out a couple of things in this, and I would recuse myself from this voting. But as was delivered here today with the breakdown of funding, many people ask for that project, which enticed me and two other people to purchase that property. And when you look at the cost, which was provided earlier, puts you at a deficit of roughly $25,000 per home. That property was purchased for $1.5 million and is in the Jordan Lake watershed, and which is strongly suggested by DEQ, and as the civil engineer spoke here earlier tonight, and as Drew has stated previously, they don't want curb and gutter in that neighborhood. And you want the filtration of that water because that area is shedding off the drinking source. And typically what happens in a subdivision, when you have that midpoint, the ditch line would actually meets the same profile. And we actually see that same issuance between Belmont and Cypress, multiple other locations throughout the community where curb and gutter is in a residential neighborhood. Then you make a right-hand turn down there, and then you have a ditch line. So two things that my issue with that would be is one, I don't think that we have the expertise nor the qualification to say use that particular subdivision and require that. Subdivision's been the hottest topic, and everybody has asked for that. As we've seen, the majority of these, since I've been on this board, when these subdivisions were brought to council, everybody was asking, well, when is this subdivision going to get completed? Why aren't we working in there? And here's the fact. The fact is, when you take the numbers, crunch the numbers, it's a $25,000 deficit per home, not a loss of profit, actually deficit. So you're faced with two things with this subdivision. A, leave that policy number 4 in place and it never gets finished and no one ever buys it. And the 3 people who purchased that property lose $1.5 million. What does that signify to the investment and business community? Or B, we follow what the wishes of DEQ is and what the rest of these curb and gutter policies are, and we garner $350,000 townhomes, single-level townhomes that people ask for. But I can tell you, based off of the numbers, there's not a person in this world that would develop that out parcel by these guidelines. And we're gonna, and that is the only subdivision in this community that is ready to build. It has infrastructure on over 33 of the 72 lots. So what expertise gives us to outweigh DEQ, Army Corps of Engineers, and the civil engineer of what would be best suited for that area? Because we plainly stated in the Jordan Lake watershed, they do not want to see these impervious surfaces. So with that, I would strongly request that staff would remove number 4 from this policy. I don't see an issue in any of the other ones.
Well, I don't think he can even comment on this because he's involved in this.
You can't quit. Since you're recusing, you can have a general discussion.
Okay. Okay, well, then I think I've covered the general discussion in that and stated what this policy would do and how it would stifle the development of that. It would never be developed, and we'd be stuck when people look in this community with an unfinished subdivision, and when people are looking to,
Since you're recusing, instead of, like I said, I'm never going to advocate that decision. Basically, you're asking questions to satisfy yourself and, you as an investor that has an interest in this. You can adjust that, but as far as any further discussion, I just think.
so in terms of speaking of what would prevent the development of this regardless of who owns that
Well, when you said you were going to recuse yourself.
from a vote, but, so do I need to come in and speak?
If you've got a direct financial interest or a propensity to have that, I could have very easily said, you can't even take part in the discussion. So I'll let you do that because me, I'm ignorant of a lot of development going on, but you're making sound points, I think, as far as what people want to do. So I thought it would be advantageous to do that, but you're just not advocating one way or the other as far as in favor.
Fair enough. I've laid out why it couldn't be developed, so I'm not advocating, but I'm trying to educate, in that aspect. And I certainly don't think anyone up here is going to vote in a favor to give me any advantages, So, anyways, I'm done.
Let me ask you this on number 4 that he was alluding to. So why do we have number 4?
Number 4 is primarily based on the feedback that I've received, aesthetic, so that you don't have a phased development where the first phase has curb and gutter just down the street from you, 5 units down. In the second phase, you have vegetated ditch and culvert, and then another party comes in and purchases and decides to finish out phase 3, and they're all interconnected. It's all the same street, and they do proper curb and gutter. So it's consistency of that infrastructure for aesthetic reasons, but also functional reasons.
And I get that, but and I understand his point of view. So if you, say in my neighborhood, there's curb and gutter, and then there's, right around the corner, there's nothing. So there's no aesthetics involved in that. That would be more of the development of it if it was needed. If you go to DEQ and get the approval by the state saying you don't need it or whatever. So what's the difference? And I'm just speaking, because we're on that topic and he brought it up.
Yeah.
So what's the difference or what's the problem if somebody goes in to develop that and it's already there with the valley, because that's what's out there is the valley, and build beside it, joining it, and you don't have to do that. Is this the only reason it's in here is just because of the aesthetics of it? Or as long as the state or DEQ says there's absolutely no problem to go in and do a ditch line, whatever the case may be?
Sure.
Is that the only reason number 4 is in there?
No, there are environmental concerns, and I have documentation here from the EPA that discusses the implementation of best stormwater management practices and the use of curb and gutter versus other, what you might call green infrastructure options. And what this document says is that alternatives to curb and gutter, such as vegetated ditch and culvert, are really only effective in low-density development. So it wouldn't be assumed you would apply that to a high-density development, such as a townhome development like what we've approved recently for Salem Church, for Woodside Drive, for Ashcroft. It really wouldn't be appropriate, and that's coming straight from the EPA. In addition to that, there are concerns from the EPA that vegetated conveyances do not properly channel stormwater away from the individual property owners' sites. So you're going to get that runoff and that flooding across, individually owned sites instead of down and out through a conveyance method. While that does eliminate some of the nutrient removal during that process, you are, again, diverting it from the property owner's individual dwellings or individual parcels, which is a concern I know we've all heard.
Yes.
We've all dealt with that. My yard floods because curb and gutter is not properly installed where I'm at, or where the curb and gutter outlet is flowing into my yard because I just have a ditch, but all of my neighbors have curb and gutter. So it's in an effort to alleviate some of that as well.
Then we have situations too, we got an example behind Reidsville High School where an individual had a home and had lived there for years. But when a new development was right above his house, now he's flooded out every time there's a big rain. So this is something we have to take a very close look at to make sure that we take care of the people who are purchasing these homes and who live in neighborhoods where there has been a problem.
In addition to that, there are a few other things that I think are worth noting from this EPA report. One being maintenance. Maintenance of curb and gutters generally very low, while maintenance of ditch line is pretty high intensity. And the city of Reidsville's standard on that, our policy on that, is that we do not maintain those ditch lines. So that falls to the property owner for maintenance of ditch lines if the development, in fact, does not have curb and gutter. I mean, that's a concern. People are on the fence about whether or not that should be the city or whether or not that should be the sole property owner's responsibility. We also have cost considerations. I know Councilman Martin provides a plethora of financial information and economic expertise in the field of development that I personally do not have. But again, based on the EPA report, and this does come from 2019, so take it with a grain of salt, it's approximately $20 to $40 per linear foot to put in typical curb and gutter. That's the range that they were looking at. I know it's gone up from there, of course, with COVID and tariffs and all of that other stuff to get product. But the numbers that I've heard relevant to $1,500 a linear foot do not reflect what these reports from the EPA
So what I would say to that is, as Mr. Verdi spoke earlier tonight about the cost of curb, the $20 to $40 linear foot is a testament strictly to the concrete area that you place your visual eyes on. It does not constitute the underground piping and the particular boxes and all these other aspects that have to go into place that these require. And so that is strictly for what you look at when you see your eyes. That piece of concrete poured down the side, $20 to $40 a linear foot. And that is for the concrete only. That doesn't include the additional grading. It doesn't include the rock that's required to be put down, stormwater boxes, grates, and all of the drain pipings that go underground. And so there again, it's a more complex situation than looking at that particular cost, and not understanding development would be impossible. The only other thing that I would leave with this to the community or to the citizen, to the council that's here. So what we've never had, and this community's never had, is a policy in place. So look at the curb and gutter issues and stormwater issues that we have seen throughout this community. The gentleman, and I have no clue who he was, who showed up and brought this tonight and talked about the stormwater issues that he has, and the fact that when you install this infrastructure, it crosses everybody's properties, and based off of the industry standards and state standards and everything else, this is considered utilities. In any subdivision that, in municipalities that require these, unless it's an HOA subdivision, the municipality must take ownership of it, and an easement must be recorded through the path of the travel of which these individual pipes crisscross throughout the subdivision. And when you don't have a policy or a maintenance plan ahead, to combat that, we end up with this issue right here, where we've got stormwater all over the community, and we had issues like this all over the community. We had the same very issue that takes place where stormwater starts at Sip Coffee Shop, runs through town, runs through Market Square, and then runs to Hall Street and crosses the Apples property. That curbing box that is there on Hall Street, that all that pipes through and stops. It picks the pipe up, it runs across that property behind the clock up here uptown and falls into a gully. Has absolutely nothing to do with watershed issues on Big Apple Farm Supplies property. But you know what happened to that pipe? It busted, it eroded out, and there's a gully back there that you could put a small size vehicle in. Then what that did is where the water had to build up, and when you got water rushing in, it created veins and underground veins and has washed the foundation out of the buildings that are there. That's been reported to city staff. I don't know about you guys, but in general, multiple times. Mr. Hinkle here dealt with the same issue because there is no accountability, and when there is no accountability or no policy in place to maintain this, it's a free fall for all, and you end up with this same process in this same situation right here that has occurred wherever this neighborhood is that this guy, talked about, Brookwood Drive and Colonial Avenue. So the other thing that you have to think about, if you want to implement these policies in subdivision areas that are going to be then turned back over to the city in terms of the street and everything, we cannot continue to use the blanket statement is that runs across private property. You have got to come up with, because as we see, as time has eroded through, we're seeing more and more of these issues falling down and creating these. So we certainly wouldn't, I would think, continue with the same policy of not having a policy and a maintenance to deal with this. So when you're considering this curb and gutter policy, whether you're requiring it or whatever that may be, you also need to consider these issues that this man brought here, because Mr. Hinkle back there spent $160,000 last year to solve a problem. His property needed absolutely no storm water control whatsoever. It naturally graded off. But what happened is it picked the storm water up from Taco Bell, Cookout, Verizon, Harbor Freight, and even Sheets, and it all crossed over and then run across his property and created a massive sinkhole that blocked the entire access to the old Reidsville Grocery building on Freeway Drive. And it benefited him in no way but to spend $160,000 out of his pocket to ensure that the infrastructure flowed and continued to flow upstream. And so what are you going to do about that? Someone needs to be thinking about these issues and needs to be thinking about the cost of this and thinking about, as time moves forward, what legalities and responsibilities will eventually come down on this city to maintain that when you require it and it's not a necessity. So that's also something that you guys need to think about, because this isn't 1970. You don't get to go in and grade a development in any way you want. There are these checks and balances from DEQ to the Army Corps of Engineers, as well as the responsibility that the civil engineer has to possess that stamp and seal to create these areas. And so curb and gutter certainly didn't solve this problem, and it certainly didn't solve the problem at Big Apple, and it certainly didn't solve the problem at Reidsville Grocery. Big Apple spent almost $40,000 and then threw their hands up and left it and said, no more will I invest in this. So, as you guys take these policies into consideration, you need to think about the different state regulations that govern these policies, and you need to think about the maintenance and the outlook of these, and put yourself in this position. If you was in Mr. Hinkle's position, or if you was in Big Apple's position, and you're in a neighborhood that a curb and gutter is in that area, and a stormwater pipe crosses your front yard, there's another example near Belmont Drive where this actually took place, and the gentleman got quotes on it, and it's about $30,000 to repair, and he don't need it. He don't need this. But you know what? And he's reached out for help, and we said, hey, it's on private property. We don't take care of that. So does anybody up here have $30,000, $40,000, $160,000 to maintain these underground utilities that are public utilities, because they're serving the neighborhood as a whole? Does anyone here have that kind of money to make these repairs on your own? And so if we're going to consider what's in the community's best interest, then we need to take that in consideration and look at the dollars in which that is cost to repair. And also know and understand that these utilities have a life expectancy and a lifespan that requires replacements. Cement has a roughly 35-year life expectancy, sometimes 40, depending on the circumstances. So a lot of that times, that's what that is. So stuff doesn't last forever, and we're seeing that right now across this community in many areas with no path of repair, but to fall at the burden of people who can't afford to fix it. As we know, we're a Tier 1 community. So I hope you guys think about that when you make these decisions as well.
Are we ready for a motion?
First motion needs to be, where every council member has a duty to vote, and Mr. Martin has said that he's going to recuse himself, so council members, other council members need to approve his recusal. So we have a motion, second, and a vote to allow him to recuse himself.
Okay. We need a motion to allow the recusal of Councilmember Martin from the motion.
Second.
Any discussion? None. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Now, is there a motion for the curb and gutter?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that we do the policy amendments, we review everything and do the policy amendments based on what you have presented so far.
Based on the middle ground, just for clarification.
Yes.
We have a motion? And we have a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, raise your right hand.
Thank you kindly.
Next item on the agenda, consideration of repair work at Kelly's Way, enclosure 10. City Manager Moore.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'll try and go through this quickly. We do have Ms. Dawn Sharaba from the Reidsville Area Foundation, so thank you for sticking with us tonight. The Reidsville Area Foundation is experiencing water intrusion inside their building. This water intrusion is causing mold and deteriorating the internal bricks. Reidsville Area Foundation solicited a proposal from Stolz's Engineering to investigate this issue. Based on the engineering's report, the water intrusion is getting trapped behind the planters in Kelly's Way. It's recommended in this engineering report to remove the landscaping planters at each end of the alleyway, including all landscaping bricks and plants. The city does not have the staff or the resources to do this at this time. Ms. Sharaba with the Reidsville Area Foundation, I requested that the engineering firm give both organizations a proposal to do this work. Attached in your packet, you'll see the proposal, but I'll hit the highlights. The exterior wall issues would be $45,000. That would be at the expense of the city of Reidsville. It would be $8,000 for interior biocide application and HEPA cleaning. That'd be at the expense of Reidsville Area Foundation. It would be anywhere from $15,000 to $20,000 for interior mortar repointing and restoration, and that would be at the expense of the Reidsville Area Foundation. At this time, we don't have the cost for engineering and due diligence. The estimated total cost for this project to get this corrected is anywhere from $68,000 to $73,000. Again, does not include engineering or due diligence costs. The proposal to do this work for the city of Reidsville is estimated with $40,000 with a contingency of an additional $5,000. Again, please keep in mind this proposal does not include engineering or due diligence costs, and this proposal does not include the lowering landscape planters being reinstalled. The estimated time to complete this work is 30 days once the proposal is approved. The Reidsville Area Foundation will meet later this month and review this proposal as well. Once the city and Reidsville Area Foundation agree on the proposed path forward, work can begin. The alleyway will also need to be closed during the construction to protect the public. The city of Reidsville would also need to pick up the brick pavers once they are removed. The pavers will be placed on wooden pallets. So the motion we'd be looking for tonight is to approve the proposed contract between the City of Reidsville and Solfus Engineering for Boone Masonry, Inc. to perform the work outlined in the attached proposal in the amount of $45,000 with the understanding we do not have a total cost yet on engineering. I believe Chris will need to do a budget amendment as well to come out of fund balance if this is something council would like us to look at. Ms. Dawn, did I miss anything? I tried to hit the highlights. Okay. Thank you.
Any questions of Manager Moore? What is the favor of council?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the proposed contract between the City of Reidsville and, I can see this, the engineering firm, masonry, to perform the work outlined in the attached proposal in the amount of $45,000 plus the whatever it's going to cost for the engineer.
We have a motion? Second. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, raise your right hand.
Thank you. Mayor and Council, I'll bring you back an update next month. Once Reidsville Area Foundation you've met, Ms. Donna, I'm happy to go to your meeting as well, but I'll provide you an update next month on where we're going with this, but thank you for your time.
Next item, board and commission appointments. Consideration of October appointments for Parks and Recreation Advisory Commission, enclosure 11. We have 2 people. Mr. Dante Carter and Miss Donna Graves. Bill, can we do them both at one time, or do we have to do them separate? Can I get a motion for Mr. Dante Carter?
Make a motion to approve Dante Carter for Reidsville Parks and Recreation Advisory Commission.
Do we have a second? Second. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, raise your right hand. Ms. Donna Graves. Is there a motion?
Motion.
We have a motion,
Second.
and we have a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, raise your right hand. Thank you. Next, we have manager's report, enclosure 12.
Great, thank you, Mayor and Council. Again, I'll be brief. Just a couple announcements. Fab Festival is this Saturday, October the 18th from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. in downtown Reidsville. Also, our downtown trick-or-treating will be Thursday, October 30th from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m., followed by a movie at Market Square at 6:45 p.m. Also, please note that the next City Council meeting for November 11th, 2025 falls on Veterans Day. Therefore, the City Council meeting will be held on Monday, November 10th at 6 p.m. at City Hall. And then just a couple of personnel announcements. Charles Williams has stayed with us, so I'd be remiss not to recognize him. He has been, Charles, if you want to stand real quick, Charles Chuck Williams has been selected as the new building code administrator for the City of Reidsville. Welcome. We're so glad to have you.
Thank you very much.
And we've also hired Ms. Tanya Rumley, who's our new full-time code enforcement officer with the City of Reidsville. So Mayor and Council, also Ms. Diane Sawyer was here. She did have a conflict. She needed to leave. She has left updates that Chris and I will pass out at the end of the meeting for the chamber. And Mayor and Council, that concludes my report.
Thank you. Council members' reports. Mayor Pro Tem.
No report this month.
Councilman Martin.
Nothing.
Councilman Hairston. Councilman Coates.
Attended the 9/11 ceremony at the fire department on 9/16, attended the Java Jargon, 9/25. Went down with the practice pumpkin run for the Coming Up Fab Festival they wanted to try. That was interesting. 9:30 was 2-on-2s, and then most recent one on October 3rd, attended the Women's Garden Club, which they had a presentation by and speaking by City Manager Moore and the staff, city staff. That's my report.
Okay. Councilwoman Dejanay.
Mr. Mayor, on 9/18, I attended the RDC Advisory Board meeting. 9:30, the 2-on-2 meeting, and then also that date, I attended the Citizens Economic Development Annual Meeting Dinner. And on 10/1, Reidsville Chamber Board meeting. On 10/7, the First Carolina Bank After Hours, and 10/10, Chamber Champions Celebration of 2025.
I'll do just a few of my reports. I attended the 9/11, also at Station 1. I attended the Dante Neal signing at Reidsville High School. He's going to attend UNCG, so it'll be close enough for us to go and see him play basketball. And I also attended the Tate's Pumpkin Patch service on that day, Black Family Day at Market Square. And the pumpkin roll. I cheated a little bit on that. I'll do better when we have the actual roll. And that's going to end my report. We've come to the end of the service, as the pastor would say. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Either one.
We got a tie.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor, raise your right hand. As always, I thank you all for being here tonight.